Chapter 1275. Chen Guang was in a dilemma. If this continued, the two seniors would not really believe him no matter what he said. After all, the two of them had completely regarded themselves as the natives of the true martial domain. Although their memories were still somewhat fragmented, they were very fragmented and imperfect. He had to think of a way to make the two completely believe what he said. However, this kind of thing involved the most fundamental rule power of the true martial domain. Although his strength was tyrannical, and he could even integrate into the true martial domain, he could also understand the rules, and he could control the rules to a certain extent. However, it was too difficult to touch the souls of the two seniors in front of him. Moreover, they had crossed millions of years and experienced countless generations of reincarnation. Forget it. Let's stop here. I don't know if the two of you can be sure that I have no malice towards you. You see, with my strength, if I really want to harm you, I can really press the two of you to the ground with a finger. However, I, Chen Guang, swear to the heavens that with the relationship between the two of you and me, and the kindness you have shown me, even if you stab a knife into my stomach, I will not fight back. The true martial domain's mountains and rivers are fleeting clouds to me. It is not worth mentioning at all. The two of you are my seniors. The disciples that you regard as your own daughters are also my women. Chen Guang said and stopped talking. Wu Qingming immediately grasped the point, both of the two little girls. Chen Guang thought about it. He and Xian Qin were already set in stone. Although the relationship between him and Wu Miaowan was still pure for the time being, he might not be able to resist her sugar-coated bullets one day. After all, this girl was very interested in him. Well, both. Abbess Xian Yuan next to him was furious. You brat. How can you be like this? Huh. Before she finished her words, Abbess Xian Yuan found something strange. Those two little girls were outsiders. Although they said they were his disciples, and he seemed to have some feelings and memories that were awakening, these things were too long ago. His memories might seem real, but he shouldn't be able to accept them so quickly. But just now, when this guy said that the two little girls were his women, an inexplicable anger surged in his heart. At this moment, he actually forgot that he was almost in a captive situation, facing the legendary Zhen Wu Holy Emperor who had lived for millions of years. Since ancient times, there had been countless legends about the true martial Holy Emperor in the true martial domain. However, no matter which version it was, the Saint Emperor's image was extremely great. Moreover, he was portrayed as a talented, yet merciless person. In a sense, this wasn't wrong. The last time Chen Guang had wandered in the true martial world, he had treated the people and matters of this world as if he was playing a game. In any case, he thought that these people could be resurrected after they died. Therefore, his character was naturally different from his normal self. At that time, he was ruthless. He absolutely cut the grass without leaving the roots. However, after seeing Abbess Xian Yuan and Wu Qingming, it was just like when he was with Chu Zijin and Lu Fei. This was his real life, his real self. He didn't think that the title of Zhen Wu Holy Emperor was anything special, nor would he despise the lives of these people. Then, the impression that his character left to others was not the legendary Zhen Wu Holy Emperor, but an ordinary young man. Not only was he easy to talk to, but he also respected the old and loved the young. Of course, no one could ignore that this young man's personal strength was very strong. He was like a walking nuclear bomb, and he could continue to fire and explode. Now, Chen Guang gave Abbess Xian Yuan this illusion. So, after hearing that he ate the two girls, Abbess Xian Yuan was inexplicably angry and blurted out. However, Abbess Xian Yuan reacted halfway through her words. The young man sitting in front of her was an old monster, who was famous for millions of years in the Zhenwu Jie. He was an invincible person who could suppress a city and a world with one finger. He was the Zhen Wu Holy Emperor. This was very embarrassing. Wu Qingming, who was next to her, reacted quickly and quickly pulled Abbess Xian Yuan from the side, trying to smooth things over. Those two little girls can get the Zhen Wu Holy Emperor's favor. They are also blessed in life. No, no, no. Listen to me. I only have a relationship with Enchanting now. Wu Miaowan and I are still innocent. Qin Guang was not offended at all. Instead, he took the initiative to explain, it's just that the two of them are inseparable. Even if my relationship with Wu Miaowan is pure, if something happens to her, I will treat her equally. Qin Guang did not expect that because of this episode, the distance between him and the two seniors had suddenly shortened a lot. Although it was difficult to restore the memory of the two in the real world in a short time, Qin Guang found that through this face-to-face language communication, it seemed that it could really strengthen the memory awakening of the two. Qin Guang speculated that there were probably two reasons for this. One was that although millions of years had passed, the souls of the two had reincarnated and changed in this enclosed space, there was still no fundamental change in their bones. In addition, as the Zhen Wu Holy Emperor, he was one of the incarnations of the Zhen Wu Jie's rules. They were with him and were shrouded by the rules that spread out from his body all the time. They were closer to the origin of this world, which was also conducive to the soul recovery of the two. He decided to make a conclusion to this meeting. Two seniors, I have told you about the matter. After I go back, I will inform the three emperors of the holy city to prepare for a full connection with the evil ghost faction. From now on, the evil ghost faction no longer needs to act in the dark like before. They can appear in the open. If you are interested, I can even let the evil ghost faction become the master of the 9 great holy cities. In addition, it is somewhat inappropriate to use the word evil ghost as a name. I personally suggest to change the name. It will be easier for the people of the Zhen Wu Jie to accept it. Of course, the greater the power, the greater the responsibility. The 9 great holy cities have made contributions and mistakes in the past millions of years. They have indeed implemented some of the concepts that I have left in the past from the real world. However, for millions of years, they can't even make a computer or a mobile phone. This progress has made me very disappointed. It is time to find a way to change the mode of the Zhen Wu Jie and become the master. Wu Qingming couldn't believe it. Is this true? I'm afraid that even if you order it, the people of the 9 great holy cities won't stop you, right? It is easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but it is difficult to go from extravagance to frugality. The 9 great holy cities have ruled the Zhen Wu Jie for millions of years. I'm afraid it won't be easy to make them give up the power in their hands. Qin Guang smiled. He casually waved his palm towards the sky. After a moment, a shocking palm energy flew out. It turned into a huge dragon with a diameter of more than 100 feet and a length of 10,000 feet. It soared into the sky, and bombarded the clouds in the sky. A thunderous sound came from the sky. The clouds in the sky were bombarded, and a huge hole appeared. Moonlight, which was countless times brighter than the usual radiance, fell from the sky. It fell on the peak of the great snowy mountain, where the 3 people were sitting cross-legged. Qin Guang's seemingly casual punch had the effect of poking a hole in the sky. You too, have you forgotten what is the most effective way to speak in the Zhen Wu Jie? If anyone disobeys my orders, I will kill him. Qin Guang's attitude reminded the 2 seniors of his true identity in this place. This was the Zhen Wu Holy Emperor who could make hundreds of millions of people submit to him. However, his attitude showed that he treated the 2 of them as his own people. Instead, he put the 9 great holy cities on the opposite side. Abbess Enchanting and Wu Qingming looked at each other. They had an indescribable feeling in their hearts. Do you 2 believe me now? After saying this, Qin Guang changed into a smiling look. It was like how the people of the evil ghost faction treated their new members. Abbess Enchanting sighed, what's the difference if you believe me or not? Qin Guang laughed, Abbess can see through it. However, there's still a long way to go. You will see my sincerity soon. Wu Qingming, who was next to him, said suspiciously, listening to you, you intend to restrain the 2 of us by your side. You won't. Qin Guang waved his hand again and again, don't joke around. You 2 were my elders in my previous life. Even if you beat me to death, I won't have that kind of thought. I won't restrain the two of you. Instead, I plan to follow you. At the same time, I can use the cultivation methods of the Thousand Despair sect and the Thousand Flowers Valley as the foundation. Combined with the cultivation methods that you two have figured out, I can tailor the real peerless divine skill for you two. At that time, I'm afraid that dozens of martial artists like the three emperors of the Holy City will not be a match for you. It will also be more convenient for the evil ghost faction to connect with the 9 great holy cities. Hearing this, Wu Qingming and Abbess Enchanting looked at each other in silence. Both of them could not hide the shock in their hearts. Until now, the two of them finally completely believed that they were really important to each other. When the emotional exchange was almost over, Chen Guang finally revealed his true intention and asked another thing that he was very concerned about. By the way, I once heard from the 3 emperors of the Holy City that the evil ghost faction had stolen 9 ancient wells in the 9 great holy cities a year ago, right? As he said this, Chen Guang looked at the two of them expectantly. Unexpectedly, Wu Qingming and Abbess Enchanting shook their heads in confusion. Wu Qingming was the first to deny it. How is that possible? Why would we steal a well for no reason? Abbess Enchanting also said, we have also heard about this. We used to think that the 9 great holy cities made trouble out of nothing and framed us, trying to find a reason to start a war with the shady ghost faction. Do you mean that it's true? In an instant, Chen Guang felt unwell. What a joke. There was such a big hole in the imperial palace of the 9th holy city. Who would be stupid enough to use such a reason to frame others for no reason? Could it be that the 3 emperors of the holy city were fooling me? Did they really dig it themselves? It can't be that ridiculous, right? Chen Guang pondered in his heart. With his eyesight, the 3 emperors of the holy city and the captain of the 13 guiding squadrons did not have the ability to lie in front of him. Then the problem was, the ancient well was really stolen, but it was really not done by the evil ghost faction. Then who did it? What was the purpose? Chapter 1276. Chen Guang couldn't figure it out. He couldn't figure out what other forces could steal the ancient well in the 9 holy cities in the true martial domain without anyone noticing except the evil ghost faction. The development of things was completely beyond Chen Guang's expectations. Before this, he firmly believed that finding the 2 saints of the evil ghost faction was equivalent to finding the ancient well. After discovering that these 2 people turned out to be Abbess Enchanting and Wu Qingming, Chen Guang was even more convinced that this matter was settled. First of all, he had overwhelming strength. Secondly, although the 2 seniors had experienced countless reincarnations, their performance in front of Enchanting and Wu Miaowan proved that their memories of their previous lives had not been erased in these millions of years. The reason why their memories were so tenacious should be because they came in with a very complete soul, which was different from the natives of the true martial domain. Therefore, even if on the surface he seemed to have a hostile relationship with the 2, Chen Guang still had the confidence to subdue them first, and then slowly use words or other means to evoke their memories, while gradually restoring the relationship between the 2 sides. If the 2 seniors could finally recognize Enchanting and Wu Miaowan as master and disciple, it would be a happy ending for everyone. First, find the ancient well, then let the master and disciple recognize each other. In addition, continue to gather human players in the 9th holy city and send them to the ancient well in the 9th holy city. Of course, he especially needed to take care of his friends and the members of the Heaven Department. After all, the size of the ancient well seemed to be small. Maybe there was a limit to the number of people who could jump into the well every day. It was impossible to take care of millions of players. All of this seemed to be perfect. But now, his plan was all messed up. It's impossible. Who can it be? Where can I find it? Chen Guang said to himself. He thought that things must not be so simple. There must be some clues that he hadn't discovered secretly controlling everything in the true martial domain. Moreover, this hidden force may be related to the source of the heavenly Holy Grail. Otherwise, it was impossible to make the ancient well in the 9 holy cities disappear at the same time a year before the mission was about to arrive. So, who is messing with me? What is the purpose? What good would it get if this force obstructed the normal progress of the Heavenly Holy Grail mission? When the three of them returned to White Town, Chen Guang was still thinking about the question in a daze. Abbess Xian Huan and Wu Qingming didn't announce his identity immediately. Once the shocking news that Zhen Wu Divine Emperor had appeared in White Town was known by others, only God knew how much trouble it would cause. However, Chen Guang, accompanied by the two seniors, went to the ice prison to fetch Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan. Chen Guang did not need to guard against anyone, nor did he need to worry about Abbess Xian Yuan and Wu Qingming secretly betraying him. As long as he had absolute power, he had nothing to fear. Although they had met a few times before, this was the true reunion of master and disciple. Chen Guang only watched from the side for a while, but he didn't stay to be a third wheel. He could see that although the two seniors were more or less reserved, they had already believed everything he said in their hearts. They had already begun to take the initiative to accept these two disciples from a different world. Chen Guang returned to his room, propped up the pillow high, and pondered about the current situation. All at once he was at a loss again. In his mind, he constantly deduced everything that had happened after he came to the true martial domain. From the beginning when he met the four gods when he first arrived until now when he was lying in this White Town, he recalled everything in detail. He felt that he had neglected a very important thing. What was it? Chen Guang continued to think like this until the next morning. When Chen Guang met up with Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan, who had spent the entire night talking with their respective masters, he finally came to a sudden realization from Xian Qin's careless words. The situation at that time was like this. After the master and disciple recognized each other, they had a long talk all night. The four of them talked about life's ideals and simple meals, especially when Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan told them some of their master's habits in the real world. Only then did the two masters completely believe them. Everyone had their own unique habits. Some people snore when they sleep, some people like to put vegetables in their rice, some people like to speak with some catchphrases, and some people like to walk on the left side of their friends when they walk. These little habits were impossible to know unless one was very close and familiar with them. However, Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan's words were almost accurate, so they had no choice but to believe them. One had to know that although they had experienced countless reincarnations, many of their habits had never changed. Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan listened to their master talk about Chen Guang's plan. This was great. They immediately decided to become new members of the Shady Ghost faction and began to give their master advice. They shared their experience in managing the heavenly division in the real world. They came up with all kinds of novel ideas. Chen Guang was completely out of the picture this time. The next day, Chen Guang talked with the two about his various actions and experiences after entering the 9th holy city. He mentioned that he planned to find the ancient well first, and then only let the human players enter. The Protoss players would stay where they were. Unless he and all the human players jumped into the well, it would be the Protoss players' turn. However, his plan was ruined. Xian Qin suddenly said, "According to what you said, all the ancient wells in the holy city are gone. Then, the Protoss players have no reason to be so obedient, right? They even look down on us. If they have the kind of strength you said, then they have no reason to be so obedient." Wu Miaowan also said, "That's right. Even if there are too many martial emperors in the 9th holy city and they can't cause any trouble, in the holy cities below the 7th floor, they have the emperor god leading them. There's no reason for them to restrain themselves, right?" Chen Guang's whole body suddenly froze, as if he had been hit by a spell. After a while, he slapped his forehead and said, "Hey, why didn't I think of that earlier? Since the Protoss look down on the humans, they must be thinking of getting to the front no matter what. Now that the ancient well is gone, they should be more anxious than I am." But other than the news of the Protoss stirring up trouble, these people seemed to have disappeared into thin air and never appeared again. Xian Qin also concluded, there is only one possibility. Either they know the whereabouts of the ancient well, or they at least know why the ancient well is gone. Chen Guang nodded, "That's true. It seems that we have to return to the ninth holy city as soon as possible. On the one hand, we have to arrange the handover between the evil ghost faction and the ninth holy city. On the other hand, I have to issue an order to search for the whereabouts of the Protoss in the entire true martial domain. That afternoon, Chen Guang and his team of 5 first took the fake foot brake plane of the evil ghost sect back to the fifth holy city. Then, Chen Guang led the way and dug out the top-notch machine that he had hidden outside. Then, he showed Senior Nun Xian Yuan and Wu Qingming what was the real top-notch black technology. He also showed off Chen Guang's driving skills. After arriving at the ninth holy city, Chen Guang summoned the 3 emperors and the captains of the Guiding 13 squadron on the spot. In addition, all the senior management of the entire ninth holy city were gathered. When Chen Guang introduced Xian Qin and Wu Qingming, it caused a lot of commotion. However, the speed of Chen Guang's suppression was faster than the speed of the commotion. He still only used one palm, but this time, it blasted into the crowd in front of him. No one was injured, but more than 100 martial emperors and thousands of martial emperors could not stand. They were trembling under the power of Chen Guang's palm. Haven't you all forgotten something? If anyone questions my decision, then my habit is to change a group of obedient people. After leaving these words, Chen Guang turned around and left. The handover that shook the entire true martial domain's power structure was completed in an instant under such an incredible situation. However, the real difficulty that Chen Guang faced was in another place. In the blink of an eye, 50 years had passed, and a new city was built near the ninth holy city. This new city was filled with millions of true martial domain's natives. They were not old people, they were also outsiders. Because these players had the characteristic of maintaining their youthful looks and not aging, the outsiders gradually began to refer to them as Unaged. In the past 50 years, human players came to the ninth holy city in various ways, but everyone was like passengers stranded in the airport with nowhere to go. Fortunately, people did not age in this world. Although they did not know what had happened, at least they did not have to worry about dying of old age here. The large number of human players had brought a lot of real changes to the true martial domain. The knowledge brought by millions of human elites had changed the true martial domain crazily in the past 50 years, making the technological progress of this world even faster than the previous millions of years. Chen Guang was bored to death as he fiddled with the newly developed true martial pad. His mind was in a daze. 50 years had passed, but he couldn't find any movement of the Protoss. These people seemed to have disappeared into thin air. He called Luli but did not get a response. These bastards, could it be that they hid the ancient well and secretly jumped away? Chapter 1277. Why are you in a daze? Don't you have a lecture in the afternoon? Why? Do you want to slack off? While Chen Guang was in a daze, someone gently touched the back of his head and a sweet-sounding voice resounded from his back. Chen Guang turned around. Why are you here? Aren't you going to have a concert today? Why don't you hurry up and prepare? It was Jiang Yage who appeared behind Chen Guang. Most of his friends and relatives who had become players had gathered in the ninth holy city in the past 50 years. Only Wenwen, who was immersed in the world of martial arts in the true martial domain, hadn't returned. However, she still asked someone to bring him a letter. The main idea was that she didn't need to worry. She intended to learn the way of the true martial Holy Emperor and walk the path of the Holy Emperor. She wanted to learn and analyze all kinds of martial arts in the true martial domain by herself. Chen Guang was helpless at that time. There were 400,000 kinds of martial arts. How could he have the time to slowly learn them? Besides, isn't it ready-made and installed in my own head? It's better for you to stay by my side rather than wasting your unlimited energy to search for it. With my current hand speed, I can arrange hundreds of clerks to give you dozens of secret books every day. You won't be able to finish reading them. However, he just thought about it. Although the mobile phone had been developed, Wenwen obviously didn't intend to contact Chen Guang. She was the only one who brought the messages. Chen Guang couldn't find her at all. Of course, She knew that staying by Chen Guang's side was a shortcut. However, Wen obviously couldn't accept such an arrangement with her character. If she didn't have the strongest martial heart, she wouldn't have become the #1 genius in China before the appearance of Chen Guang. You want me to be Chen Guang's subordinate? Sorry, even if you're the true martial holy emperor, you can't. On the other side, Jiang Yage curled her lips. I don't even know how many times I've sung. It doesn't matter whether I practice or not. Chen Guang shrugged. It's your fault for not being able to write new songs. Jiang Yage rolled her eyes helplessly. What can I do? It wasn't just me and Sister Shirihua. We also contacted many people who knew how to compose songs and lyrics in the real world. But for some reason, the things that were easy for us to do in the past suddenly became difficult. No matter how we write it, even if we manage to write it, we won't be able to satisfy ourselves. Then, we won't be able to show it to others. Chen Guang had also heard about this phenomenon from Jiang Yage. The human players who came here were the elites of the elites. Whether it was their routine work or their creativity, they should be considered the best of the best. However, the fact was that the scientific and technological level of the true martial world had reached a level very close to that of the real world by relying on the joint efforts of millions of people over the past 50 years. However, the pace of scientific and technological progress had suddenly come to a halt since 5 years ago. It was as if everyone had suddenly lost their creativity. But now, Chen Guang gradually discovered that this creativity wasn't suddenly lost. It was never there from the beginning. Although the true martial domain had used 50 years to go through the technological progress of the Earth for hundreds of years, in the end, it was the result of these human elites sharing the existing knowledge. At this point, if they wanted to go further, they would have to go beyond the current scope of the Earth. The people were still the same people. Even if these people held important positions on the Earth, they could still contribute to the progress of the humans on the Earth. But in the true martial domain, it was as if everyone's hands and feet were tied by invisible shackles. If I can't write it, then forget it. Anyway, I have nothing to do. I also tried to learn martial arts, but it seems that there is no progress. I might as well count the days and calculate when I can spend the reward points. Jiang Yage sighed again. She didn't dawdle with Chen Guang anymore. She said goodbye and left. Not long after, Tang Ying appeared again. She was very straightforward. The samples are used up again. Hurry up, give me another round. Chen Guang's face was bitter. Didn't I give you one yesterday? How come it's gone so fast? Tang Ying chuckled. Don't we have enough manpower and equipment now? Seeing that the long march of 10,000 li was only one breath away, I had to go all out in one spurt of energy. Same old rules, I'll help you. Chen Guang stood up and walked to the bedroom. Come on, come on. He couldn't help but feel depressed. For any normal man, it was a very happy thing for Tang Ying to do that, and finally do that. But after 50 years, Sister Tang Ying would only do it herself every time. She didn't really do it. What was fun at the beginning became boring and tedious in the end. Chen Guang felt strange. What kind of restraint was it that made Tang Ying persist in doing this for 50 years, and yet she never had a strong desire to take it one step further? Sister Tang Ying, what's the point of doing this research now that we're in this place? Moreover, even if you really can completely decipher my genes here, this body of mine right now isn't completely the same as my real body. Moreover, I'm afraid you won't be able to bring the results out, right? When the storm subsided, Chen Guang complained. He was on the verge of a mental breakdown. Others needed creativity to do things. Although Tang Ying's research seemed to be very high-end, it was ultimately a tedious and repetitive task of deciphering the finished product. However, he felt that Tang Ying's actions were superfluous and meaningless. With a firm expression, Tang Ying said, "You can't say that. According to my comparison, you might look different from the real world in terms of appearance and figure, but the DNA at the bottom of your body is completely the same. Also, even if you can't bring it out, at least you've completed a complete analysis." This is a magnificent feat in human history. The Human Genome Project started in the 1980s, and until now, it hasn't reached 100% completion. Also, even if I can't bring the data out, don't I still remember a lot of it in my brain? Technology is based on people, and the most important thing is me, understand? Yes, I understand. Then I'll leave first, I'm busy over there. Oh, by the way, if Huitong comes looking for you, don't tell her that I'm here again. Otherwise, she'll keep saying that I'm going to squeeze you dry. Remember that. Tang Ying waved her hand and disappeared in a flash. After a while, Wu Tong, who was wearing a police uniform, came. Qin Guang, this is the recent public security report of the 9th Sacred City and the adjacent city. Take a look, there's an evil sect called the Heavenly Destruction Sect outside the city. I originally wanted to ask Senior Xian and Senior Wu for help to encircle and suppress them, but they told me to come to you to get a document first. Perhaps Wu Tong's illness wasn't light, but she couldn't stay idle. On one hand, she had some skills after coming to the true martial world. On the other hand, she had a knack for public security management. Of course, the most important thing was her relationship with Qin Guang. She had taken on the responsibility of public security management in the 9th layer of the true martial world. Qin Guang didn't look at the document that Wu Tong handed to him, and quickly signed it. Wu Tong didn't hesitate and kissed him on the cheek. Then, she left happily. Looking at Wu Tong's silhouette, the awkward feeling in Qin Guang's heart grew stronger. It seemed that everyone in the true martial domain had fallen into a very mysterious state. Although they seemed to have lost their creativity, everyone seemed to be very immersed in their own situation. But what was even more strange was that after 50 years, everything seemed to be developing, but the relationship between him and the people around him seemed to be the same as 50 years ago, or the state before he entered the heavenly Holy Grail. In addition, it was reasonable to say that most people had friends and relatives in the outside world. 50 years was enough for a young man to become a white-haired old man, but no one missed their family and friends in the outside world. Even when they were chatting, they were still very calm, and their hearts were like still water. It seemed as if everything had stopped a day ago, but in fact, 50 years had passed. It seemed as if everyone's emotions were frozen. Chapter 1278. In terms of time, 50 years had passed. But in terms of the relationship between people, everything seemed like it had happened yesterday. Nothing had changed, and nothing had happened. The world in front of him had been turned upside down. It was changing with each passing day. However, people's hearts were inexplicably stuck in the past. This mysterious feeling made Qin Guang's mind feel very abrupt and puzzled. However, he was the only one who was sober at this time. He had mentioned this problem to others more than once. However, whether it was Wu Tong who was obsessed with being a sheriff, Tang Ying who was obsessed with her DNA, Zhuo Jingxi who brought photocatalysis and environmental protection from the real world to the real martial domain, or of course, Lin Jingwei and Sun Xiaoxuan who were his classmates in the real world, none of them took his vigilance seriously. Now, they all found their own roles in the real martial domain and enjoyed it. Qin Guang even bumped into someone he didn't want to bump into. Brother Baihua had also come to the true martial world. Fortunately, he didn't mention anything about Qin Yu anymore. Instead, he focused his attention on establishing and managing his own team in the true martial world. In addition, Baihua also managed a company, and this company was involved in the development of energy sources in the true martial world. Every human player from the real world had inexplicably found their own position in the real martial domain. It seemed that these 50 years were the continuation of their lives in the real world. However, Qin Guang knew that it was just like how he had cultivated in the cup realm. If a person's thoughts were frozen and emotions were sealed, even if they lived for tens of thousands of years, it would only be an instant, and it wouldn't have any meaning. After a long sigh, Qin Guang stood up. He looked for the captain of the 13th Guiding Squadron and asked him to summon Abbess Xine Yuan, Senior Wu Qingming, and the 3 emperors of the Holy City to the palace. He had something to say. After waiting for a while, everyone put down their work and rushed into the palace. Although the power structure of the entire true martial world had smoothly transitioned from the 9 great holy cities to the former evil ghost faction and the current heroic spirit palace, Qin Guang's status as the true martial holy emperor hadn't changed or been shaken. This verified what he had once said. He had never relied on his subordinates to enslave anyone in the true martial world for everything he had obtained. He could only rely on one thing, and that was his own absolute strength. There's still nothing? At the same time, Qin Guang looked at the dozens of people seated below with his head in a mess. Currently, in the 9th holy city, aside from the 2 seniors and the 3 emperors, even the guiding 13 squadrons had changed 6 captains. As for the other positions, they had changed again and again. The reason was simple. When Qin Guang worked here, most of the time, he was clear about rewards and punishments. Even the entire true martial world couldn't find a group of people for 50 years. Moreover, they were the divine race with very clear characteristics and goals. This was either a collusion between the inside and the outside, or the subordinates didn't work hard and didn't work hard. Qin Guang didn't punish people for these things. Some people even protested because they were dissatisfied with Qin Guang always making them do these meaningless things. Of course, the final result was that these people were stripped of all their power on the spot. Reporting to Lord Holy Emperor, a few days ago, the inspection team gathered the search teams of the major cities and held an online conference. Everyone exchanged information. There were some abnormal situations, but we eliminated all of them after investigating them one by one. They weren't the divine race that Lord Holy Emperor had mentioned. Most of them were evil demons stirring up trouble, or some small beasts that had cultivated internal power and opened their spiritual wisdom. An old man came out from the crowd and said with his head bowed. This old man looked about 60 or 70 years old, but in fact, he was more than 1,000 years old. He was originally a wild crane with no fixed abode until the evil ghost faction entered the 9 holy cities. After the birth of the Martyr's Palace, he left the mountain and embarked on an official career because of the recognition of the Martyr's Palace. In these years, this old man had done a lot of work for the Martyr's Palace. He managed the internal affairs in an orderly manner and coordinated the relationship between the old man and the natives of the true martial world. He was also in charge of the search for the divine race, but there was no progress. He couldn't do anything about it. Qin Guang rubbed his eyebrows. He felt that if he continued to frown like this, his eyebrows would become knotted. Forget it. If there's nothing else, you can leave. He waved his hand. At this time, Qin Guang looked like an incapable ruler in ancient times. He would summon his ministers just because he didn't agree with them. Then, he would dismiss them. Lord Holy Emperor, this subordinate has another matter to report. A middle-aged martial artist walked out from the crowd. Qin Guang looked down. He remembered this person. If one were to understand his profession in modern terms, he would probably be the Minister of Mines. Qin Guang had never asked him about these matters. If there was a ranking of the most useless person in the true martial world, he would probably be the champion without any suspense. Qin Guang decisively refused. You don't need to report these matters to me. You can do as you see fit. Nowadays, the mining technology of the true martial world was close to that of the real world. Since the true martial world was vast and rich in resources, the workload of the mining department was terrifying. There were new mines being excavated almost every day. Qin Guang had been diligent for a short period of time before. However, he didn't last 3 days before he was dizzy from all kinds of documents piled up on his desk. Now that this old man wanted to find trouble for him, he decisively pushed the responsibility away. The Minister of Mines also understood his habits and explained, Lord Holy Emperor, this subordinate doesn't want to talk about the mines. A few days ago, the exploration team led by Martial Emperor Chang Feng went to the highest peak. They seem to have seen the woman you asked us to pay attention to at the foot of the mountain. Qin Guang's eyes lit up. Really? Where is she? Tell me, what's going on? Since a long time ago, he was not satisfied with only one-way communication with Wenwen. In addition to ordering his subordinates to search for the Protoss, He did order them to report to him immediately if they found any trace of Wenwen. However, he had not seen Wenwen in the true martial world. He didn't know what her appearance had changed. Every time she asked someone to bring a letter, she would hide her face. Therefore, he could only briefly describe Wenwen's characteristics to others. She had the temperament of an old man, was relatively cold, and was addicted to various martial arts. This was the best he could do. Unexpectedly, the security officers of countless cities found nothing. On the contrary, the exploration team found Wenwen's whereabouts. After getting the others to leave, Chen Guang called the mining department head to the backyard and asked about the matter. Only then did he understand what was going on. The leader, Martial Emperor Chang Feng, was a rising martial arts master. He was young but powerful, and had a rare warm-hearted heart. He joined the Martyr's Palace's mining department more than 10 years ago and became the leader of the mining department's strongest exploration team. After all, the true martial world was different from Earth. There were many dangerous places. Without a certain level of strength, it was impossible to reach these places. For example, at the foot of the highest peak that Martial Emperor Chang Feng went to, the yin and yang pressure was extremely strong. Without the strength of a martial emperor, one could not even approach it. At that time, according to a senior expert's notes, we speculated that there might be a large amount of rare earth ores in the terminating Thought Valley to the east of the highest peak. Thus, Martial Emperor Chang Feng decided to lead his team to investigate. Not long after they arrived, they found a lot of rare earth ores in the terminating Thought Valley. They originally intended to continue exploring, but they were blocked by two strange beasts that had cultivated into demons. These two strange beasts seemed to have spiritual intelligence and were very powerful. Either one of them would not be at a disadvantage against Martial Emperor Chang Feng. They encountered two strange beasts at the same time, but Martial Emperor Chang Feng was the only one in the team. At that time, the situation was extremely critical. If it wasn't for that veiled woman in green clothes lending a helping hand and helping Chang Feng block one of the strange beasts, they would have probably been killed. Later on, Martial Emperor asked for her name, but she avoided it and repeatedly emphasized not to tell others that she was here. Martial Emperor thought that she was very similar to the person you told us to keep an eye out for, so he stopped exploring deeper into the terminating Thought Valley and returned immediately. He asked me to report to you. Chen Guang was shocked by the mining department head's description. According to this theory, if that person was Wenwen, did that not mean that she had become a martial supreme in 50 years? Invite Martial Emperor Chang Feng here, I want to talk to him. He's outside the main hall. After a while, Chen Guang met Martial Emperor Chang Feng, who was more interested in mining than martial arts. After a detailed inquiry, Chen Guang came to a conclusion based on the other party's description. This mysterious girl was Wenwen. It was really a case of wearing out iron shoes in fruitless search, only to find it by chance. I thought you could hide until the end of time, but didn't you still give yourself away? At the end, Martial Emperor Chang Feng waved his hand in annoyance. When I saw that she wanted to go in alone, I tried to persuade her not to take the risk, but she didn't listen to me. She only said that it was fine, and then she left without looking back. It's fine. Since her strength is about the same as yours, it's normal that you couldn't stop her. Alright, I already know about this. Thank you. After Martial Emperor Chang Feng left, Chen Guang thought that since Wenwen was still in the terminating Thought Valley, should he make a trip there? To others, it was a dangerous place, but to him, it was a piece of flat land. Since he had nothing to do, he might as well take a look. Who knows, he might be able to catch her in the act. He stood up and looked into the distance. It was the highest peak. Right at this moment, a beam of light suddenly shot up into the sky from the foot of the highest peak and pierced through the sky. The beam of light was more than 1,000 miles wide, and it was colorful and dazzling. It lasted for a few seconds before it suddenly disappeared. After a while, the ground under Chen Guang's feet began to shake as if there was an earthquake. The 9th sacred city was in chaos. Fortunately, most of the residents in the city were skilled, and the materials used to build the buildings were strong enough. It only shook, but the buildings did not collapse. The shaking lasted for a few minutes before it calmed down. After waiting for more than half an hour, a thunderous rumble came from afar. A few minutes later, the geologist in the palace hurried over. "Holy Emperor, we've determined the location of the earthquake source. It's the east side of the highest peak. We're asking experts from the old ones to help calculate the magnitude, but the preliminary estimate is that it should be more than 9. Qin Guang immediately asked, "Is it the terminating Thought Valley?" The geologist was stunned at first, but he immediately nodded. "We speculate that it's near the terminating Thought Valley, but we haven't confirmed it yet." Qin Guang walked out and shouted, "Prepare a plane for me. I want to go to the terminating Thought Valley." He had heard of a theory in real life. While waiting for the bus, if the bus didn't arrive after a long time, he would light a cigarette. But the cigarette wouldn't last more than 2 or 3 puffs before the bus would arrive. Then, he could only bitterly throw away the cigarette that he had only smoked for 2 puffs. If one had a wife and children, one should never play ladder games or ranked games while his wife and children were not asleep. Even if one game only lasted 15 minutes, something would definitely happen to one. At that moment, there were only 2 choices. One was to quarrel with his wife, and the other was to cheat his teammates and get reported. In short, if something bad could happen, no matter how small the possibility, it would definitely happen. This was called Murphy's Law. At that moment, Qin Guang believed in this theory a little. The strange beam of light, the terrifying earthquake that could still be felt across thousands of miles, and when one was in the terminating Thought Valley. When these 3 factors were in place, the place where the anomaly would happen would definitely be in the terminating Thought Valley, and when one would definitely be involved. Chapter 1279. From the moment Qin Guang decided to go out to the moment he piloted the plane alone and took off from the Imperial City Airport, it took less than 15 minutes. The top-notch plane that he had once used had long been eliminated. Now, his personal plane had been upgraded and was the pinnacle of the perfect combination of modern technology and internal martial arts. This plane had the technological feel of a modern fighter plane, but the material used was the ultra-strong and lightweight bone plate of a strange beast that could not be found on Earth. The surface was smeared with the oil of a giant fish and a strange beast that was extracted from nature. Apart from that, its power system also combined the effects of fuel and a martial artist's internal strength. Its flying speed was not something that an ordinary plane on Earth could compare to. With Qin Guang's skills, he could inject his internal strength without stopping and reach any place in the true martial realm. From the time the plane took off to the time he arrived at the foot of the highest peak, it only took about 10 to 20 minutes. After arriving here, he could not continue piloting the plane. The air was filled with turbulence at any time, and the extremely terrifying yin and yang qi turbulence would also cause a heavy burden on the mechanical parts. In short, Qin Guang used the limits of his mechanical endurance to perform a fancy vertical landing and landed safely. Just like the last time, after blasting a hole in the ground with his palm, he conveniently buried the plane. Qin Guang leaped and disappeared into the forest. The terrifying earthquake just now had caused severe damage to the surrounding environment. There were giant trees lying on the ground everywhere, and there were even a few fresh cracks that emitted the smell of soil on the ground from time to time. Broken tree roots stretched out randomly in the cracks, and there were a few insects crawling up and down from the tree roots from time to time, looking confused and empty. However, Qin Guang did not fly through the air but chose to fly on the ground. The closer he got to the terminating Thought Valley, the more he had an indescribable strong feeling. The air seemed to be filled with a power that was completely different from yin and yang qi. It could even prevent his mental power from extending forward. Under normal circumstances, with his skills and the realm of the true martial realm, he only needed to stand far away from the terminating Thought Valley and he would be able to see everything inside with just a thought. But now, no matter how hard he tried to circulate his mental cultivation technique and crazily extended his mental energy, which was enough to suppress tens of millions of people in a city, he could only see a blur in his mind's eye. About half an hour later, with Qin Guang's speed, he had traversed at least 100 miles and finally stood in front of the entrance of the terminating Thought Valley. Looking up, there were two tall mountains on both sides that pierced through the clouds. It was hard to tell how high they were. The entrance was about a few kilometers wide. There should have been dense trees growing on both sides, but at this time, they had all fallen crookedly to the ground. Not only that, Chen Guang also saw many broken tree trunks. The cuts were very smooth, but the upper halves had mysteriously disappeared. Chen Guang looked around and saw that the broken tree trunks were distributed in a regular pattern. They were basically in the shape of a ray, extending from the inside all the way to the outside. Walking in front of a tree stump, Chen Guang lowered his head to size it up. Then, he reached out to touch the fracture. There was still a faint heat on it, but the strange thing was that there were no signs of burning on the fracture. There was only one explanation for this. At the same time that the pillar of light soared into the sky, an extremely powerful heat wave spread out from within in the form of a ray, sweeping through the area and cutting off all the trees. It even evaporated the upper half of the broken tree out of thin air. He then looked at the direction of the tree stump's fracture. Although it looked crooked, it was only because the earthquake had changed the terrain. In fact, the original direction of the fracture should be completely the same, and all the sections should be completely parallel. In that case, the time when the heat wave rushed out should have been before the earthquake. There must be something extraordinary in the terminating Thought Valley. Perhaps Wenwen had discovered it, which was why such an unforeseen event had occurred. Chen Guang cried out in his heart. Could it be that Wenwen was already dead? Thinking of this, he immediately sped up his pace. Everyone else was protected by him and lived a peaceful life. If Wenwen, who was the most talented, was the first to die in this game, it would be embarrassing if word got out, and he would not be able to explain himself. When he found her in the real world, she became different from him because her character in the game had been reset. That would be a great disservice to Wenwen's identity and status as the second strongest player in the pugilistic world. Suddenly, Chen Guang stopped in his tracks. Traces of a battle appeared in front of him. There were fallen tree trunks everywhere, but there was no pattern to the position where they had fallen. From time to time, a few huge footprints would appear on the ground, and the shape of the footprints looked like 4 sharp claws. There was also a long ravine that covered the ground. The ravine was about 3 to 4 meters wide, as if it had been plowed by something. According to what Martial Emperor Changfeng had said, this was probably where the exploration team had fought alongside Wenwen. There were 2 completely different kinds of marks on the ground. One of them looked like a ferocious tiger, but it was as tall as an elephant. The other was caused by a huge snake-like monster that had slithered across the ground. Now that he saw it, if it was true, the scene back then must have been very tragic. Apart from this, Martial Emperor Changfeng had said that they had only managed to repel these 2 mutated beasts and had not killed them. This showed how powerful these 2 mutated beasts were. Chen Guang could not help but feel that Wenwen had encountered 2 such troublesome mutated beasts not far from the entrance of the End of Thought Valley. If she had been thinking normally, she would have stopped on the spot and returned. According to the geological report, the End of Thought Valley was thousands of kilometers deep. The deeper one went, the colder and wetter it became. There were weeds everywhere, and mutated beasts were everywhere. The powerful mutated beasts were even stronger than regular martial emperors. Even martial emperors like the Holy City's 3 emperors might not be able to take them down. Not only that, but there were no other special products in the End of Thought Valley. Apart from these mutated beasts, there were only some swamps. There were no natural treasures that were beneficial for martial arts. Hence, in the past countless years, only a few bored martial emperors would venture deep into the End of Thought Valley. Most of them would return empty-handed. Many of them even lost their lives in there, so there were even fewer people who went. It was only with the advancement of technology in recent years that Martial Emperor Changfeng led a team of explorers to venture deep for the purpose of mining. In the end, they ended up with nothing. Wenwen's actions were very strange. Could she have discovered something? It was impossible for her to do such a meaningless thing. She must have discovered something, which drove her to venture deeper. In that case, what was it that attracted her to enter the depths of the End of Thought Valley despite the danger? With this thought in mind, Chen Guang continued to move forward at a brisk pace. Just like what was recorded in the records, the deeper one went into the End of Thought Valley, the denser the trees became. The soil on the ground became softer as well. A faint burnt smell started to spread in the air. Occasionally, 2 or 3 mutated beasts would appear in the forest after smelling Chen Guang's scent. There were big and small mutated beasts. There were strange apes that stood on 2 feet, ghost wolves with white fur on their ears and blue flames on their paws, and giant bears that were dozens of feet tall. However, all the mutated beasts were intelligent. At first, they came after smelling a human, but when they got closer to Chen Guang, they were frightened by the dangerous aura that surged out of his body and fled in a panic. Normally, Chen Guang would be interested in catching a few mutated beasts to study them. However, now was not the time to do so. Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks and turned his head to look below him. There was a rag on the ground. Chen Guang bent down and picked up the rag. It was cold to the touch. This was a piece of green cloth made of a very special material. It was extremely tough and transparent. It was a high-quality piece of cloth that was specially used to make clothes for martial artists. 1 meter of it cost several million holy coins. If he remembered correctly, Martial Emperor Changfeng had once said that Wenwen wore green clothes. In that case, this cloth had most likely fallen from Wenwen's body. Judging from its shape, it should be part of her sleeves. She had experienced a fierce battle here, and it was extremely bitter. Even her sleeves had been torn off. From there, sparse footprints gradually appeared on the ground, leading all the way inside. Observing the shape of these footprints, it seemed that there was more than one person, and they were very messy. Although the strong earthquake had changed the terrain significantly, and many parts of the ground had been overturned, Chen Guang could always find one or several deep or shallow footprints every few hundred meters. These footprints were scattered randomly on the soft ground of the terminating Thought Valley. These footprints looked very new and seemed to have been made not long ago, no more than a week ago at most. It happened to coincide with the time when Martial Emperor Changfeng and his group met Wenwen. Wenwen had at least the strength of a martial emperor, and the opponent who could fight with her must be stronger than a martial emperor. If they were traveling normally, it would be impossible to leave these footprints. In that case, there was only one possibility. Both parties were fighting while heading inside, but it was unknown who was chasing who. Chen Guang speculated that Wenwen was being chased by someone. Who was it? Who set up an ambush in this place? What was their motive? What did Wenwen find? The doubts in Chen Guang's heart grew. Unknowingly, he had been running inside for a whole day and night. He had reached the deepest part of the terminating Thought Valley. Apart from the Martial Emperor who drew the map of the terminating Thought Valley, no one else could reach this place. However, Chen Guang suddenly saw the wreckage of a building on the side of the road. He frowned even more after he got closer to take a closer look. Judging from the materials and architectural style of these collapsed buildings, they were clearly built in the past few decades. Judging from the scale of the buildings, the wreckage covered an area of more than an acre, and at least a few dozen people could have lived in them. However, although the buildings here were completely damaged, there were no corpses. The doubts in Chen Guang's heart grew. If it wasn't the evil ghost faction, he really couldn't think of anyone who would have the need to live in this dark, damp, cold, and infested place with strange beasts. Nowadays, the whole true martial domain could be said to be prosperous and peaceful. The people lived and worked in peace and contentment. There were fewer killings in Jianghu than before. After the expansion of the 9th holy city, it could accommodate hundreds of millions of people. In addition to the elderly, the adjacent city outside could also accommodate tens of millions of martial artists. Although the concentration of yin and yang qi in the holy city was not as good as here, it was better in that it was neutral and peaceful. It would be more beneficial if one practiced internal strength. Chen Guang couldn't think of any reason. Why would one live in this place where even birds wouldn't poop? Why would they build these broken houses? Chen Guang walked 2 more rounds in the wreckage and suddenly made a surprising discovery. There were no traces of electric wires in these buildings. The more he checked, the more puzzled he became. Although only 50 years had passed, the use of electric current had already been popularized in the true martial domain. It had replaced the past backward facilities in many aspects. Nowadays, there were hundreds of billions of people in the true martial domain. Almost everyone knew about the convenience of using electricity. These houses had been built in the last few decades. Moreover, the materials used were relatively new. Even the floors were made of self-leveling cement, which had become popular in the last 10 years. So, it was even more necessary to build houses in this cold and gloomy place with electricity. It must be known that it was very convenient to generate electricity in the true martial domain. It could be arranged for a person who practiced internal strength to squat there and pedal a sports bike to generate the power of a generator. However, there were no electric wires here. There weren't any electrical facilities either. Could it be that the people who lived here didn't need electricity to produce light and heat? Could they create a comfortable environment in this place? Although most of these houses had collapsed, many of the wreckage looked very beautiful. In particular, there were some exquisitely crafted Roman reliefs on them. These reliefs indicated that the original owner of this place was very particular. Suddenly, an idea flashed in Chen Guang's mind. He finally thought of the answer. The people who lived here in the last few decades were not used to using electricity. However, they were very particular about it. So, there was only one option left, the divine race. Picking up a lamp-like thing from the ground, a look of understanding appeared on Chen Guang's face. This lamp holder was completely different from ordinary oil lamps. There was no wick inside. The bottom was not hollow, so it couldn't be filled with oil. However, this thing looked like a wall lamp hanging on the wall. So, the energy source of this thing must be the divine power of the divine race. It was really like wearing out iron shoes in fruitless search, but finding it by chance without even looking for it. Although he was very used to living in the instantaneous sea, it was after all an endless ocean as far as the eye could see. It was 70 to 80% similar to the famous post-apocalyptic movie Future Water World, just that the scale was many times larger. His good friends and the ordinary humans who were implicated might find it interesting at first, but after a long time, they would definitely feel uncomfortable and miss the land world. But the true martial domain was different. Not only was it vast, but it was also filled with beautiful scenery of famous mountains and rivers. In addition, the lakes in the true martial domain were extremely large, and the area of the larger lakes was even larger than the sum of the 4 oceans on the earth. First, they would subtly influence all the human players to adapt to this place. Using the ancient saying, they would enter a state of indulgence. Then, after they had completed the transformation of the entire world in 50 years, the next step would be to look for the famous mountains, travel all over the Zhen Wujia, and see the world. Considering the size of the true martial domain, and the size and mobility of humans, it would be impossible to thoroughly see the true martial domain without tens of millions of years. Even Chen Guang had a faint feeling that the peak of the true martial domain used to be the edge of the true martial domain. He himself used to stand on the peak, but when he looked at the peak from time to time, he would occasionally see a shadow behind the peak. At that time, Chen Guang didn't think much of it, but now that he thought about it, he felt that maybe some kind of power was secretly expanding the true martial domain. The level of science and technology that was constantly advancing suddenly stagnated. More and more strange beasts that had opened their spiritual wisdom took all kinds of abnormalities into consideration. Chen Guang also confirmed his conjecture in his heart. The mastermind behind the scenes seemed to be changing the setting of the true martial domain bit by bit, and also changing the style of the human players who entered from the outside world. When everyone slowly transitioned from the style of science and technology to the style of fantasy set by the Chinese martial arts, the human players, as outsiders, would be thoroughly integrated into the true martial domain. Everyone who was familiar with him was immersed in this world, and Chen Guang himself was afraid that he wouldn't be able to stay out of it, and could only go with the flow. The more he thought about it, the more uncertain Chen Guang became. But it seems like you have left behind a large group of very important people. My father and mother haven't even been pulled over, and they want me to become an orphan here? Chen Guang thought, if my father and mother, 7 aunts, 8 aunts, grandfather and grandmother were all pulled in, he was afraid that he would really be immersed in it without knowing it. In this regard, he could only say that he was very lucky. Then what did Wenwen discover? As he continued to go inside, Chen Guang saw traces of fighting one after another, but it seemed that the fighting was not intense, and both sides stopped after a brief encounter. Huh. It seems like those big and small footprints are running in front, but the small footprints belonging to Wenwen are lagging behind? Chen Guang stopped, lowered his head, and muttered to himself. It seemed like the two sides were fighting, and the offensive and defensive reversed, and it became Wenwen chasing, and the other side running away. What's going on? Wenwen is fighting and training at the same time. Has she become stronger? No, the probability of this happening is too low. Then there was only one explanation: the other side was anxious and in a hurry to retreat, but they could not kill Wenwen, so they were too lazy to fight back and simply ran inside. Wenwen must have discovered something, so she chased after them. Chen Guang could not help but feel a little angry. He felt that Wenwen was too rash. If she had really discovered something, why would she need to personally take the risk? As long as she passed the news to him, he would be able to kill his way in with lightning speed. There was no risk in this, and he could control the situation in advance before the other side took action. However, things had already reached this point, and Chen Guang did not have the intention to blame anyone. Perhaps Wenwen only found a little bit of information, and was not completely sure, so she decided to probe the situation first. Unknowingly, another half a day passed, and Chen Guang once again ran nearly 1,000 kilometers inside. This end of Thought Valley was in the shape of an inverted gourd, and the deeper he went, the bigger it became. Along the way, more and more strange beasts appeared, each stronger than the last. From the level of ordinary martial emperors, they gradually reached the level of the guiding 13 squadrons. At first, when these strange beasts saw how powerful Chen Guang was, they disappeared in a flash, turning around and running away. But later, when strange beasts with strength close to the holy city's 3 emperors appeared, these previously timid strange beasts suddenly seemed to have been injected with chicken blood, and they desperately rushed towards Chen Guang. Chen Guang raised his hand. He was too lazy to waste time talking nonsense. He killed one with a finger, and continued to go in. Don't look at how these strange beasts were exceptionally terrifying in front of others. In front of Chen Guang, they were completely useless. They could not even slow down his speed. As a result, Chen Guang flew on the ground. His 10 fingers were like a machine gun, shooting in all directions. Every time he pointed, there would be a corpse. The ancient well was really here, and this group of bastards had taken it with them when they left. Could it be that the Protoss planned to take the ancient well to the endless divine realm through their back door? If they really succeeded, then even if he saw through all the schemes, it would be useless, and he would be dead. Chapter 1281. Although he was a little panicked, he had already reached his limit. He couldn't go any faster. Chen Guang couldn't help but feel regretful. If the aura here wasn't so mysterious and unpredictable, he could have flown the plane here. His speed would have been much faster, and he would have reached his destination by now. However, there was no point in being anxious. He had already arrived here at this juncture. Perhaps he could catch the last train of the divine race. At least it was better than losing without knowing anything. His current speed should be equivalent to more than 180 kilometers per hour on Earth. 2 days passed unknowingly. He finally arrived at the deepest part of the terminating Thought Valley, which was marked on the map. A light screen made entirely of energy appeared in front of him. The light screen emitted a dense glow. It rose from the ground and went straight to the sky. He tried to touch the light screen. As soon as he touched it, he felt an astonishing power attacking him from the light screen. This power was stronger than he had imagined. It wasn't something that could appear in the true martial realm. From this power, Chen Guang could feel at least three characteristics. There was the yin and yang energy of the true martial realm. There was also the divine power of the divine race. However, the core was a third power that he had never felt before. He could roughly feel that this power was similar to the power of the Holy Grail. However, it was of a higher level. This third kind of power seemed to have the all-encompassing ability. It had perfectly combined the yin and yang energy and the divine power. It had formed an effect of 1 + 1 = 1. Even the strongest expert of the true martial world, a martial sage who had almost completely fused with the entire world, could suppress him. What was this third power? Was its level above the power of the Holy Grail? He couldn't help but be astonished. Up until now, whether it was Lazuli's divine power, Yuting's divine power, or even the power of the natural order that existed at all times in the universe on Earth, their level could not be compared to the power of the Holy Grail. The reason was simple. Although the Holy Grail was a divine weapon from the endless realm of the gods, and appeared to be an unassuming cup, it could create entire planes and worlds out of thin air. Although the levels of this world were high and low, there was the extremely simple and crude mosaic version of the first layer of heaven. However, there was also the huge structure of the eighth layer of heaven, the realm of true martial arts and the sea of time. In fact, there was even the world of destiny that Chen Guang had a deep memory of after he had caught a glimpse of it. Although the world of destiny was also flat, it was unknown how big it was. It might even be trillions of times bigger than the true martial realm. Its worldview and structure were no different from the universe where Earth was located. However, even such a massive and majestic plane could still be controlled by the power of the Holy Grail. So, what exactly was this third power that had appeared in front of him? Chen Guang furrowed his brows tightly. He tried again, but realized that it was still useless. With the power that he currently controlled, there was only one way to break this light curtain. That was to use all the power in his body and completely mobilize all the power that he could mobilize in the true martial realm. Then, he would use the strength of absolute suppression to offset the difference in quality and forcefully break the light curtain. However, if he did that, he was afraid that he would be exhausted in a short period of time. He did not know what kind of situation he would encounter inside, and this would put him in danger. Chen Guang raised his head and looked up. He first tried to fly up into the sky to see if he could find a way to circumvent it. However, when he really flew up, he immediately dispelled this idea. The light curtain extended from the ground of the Valley of Despair to the mountains on both sides of the Valley of Despair. Then, it continued to extend along the mountains on both sides, and it covered the entire depths of the Valley of Despair like a piece of plastic wrap. Chen Guang did not need to try to break through the mountains to make a hole. The other party was not stupid and would not leave such an obvious hole. Even if he broke through the mountains, he would most likely hit the same light curtain in the hole. For the same reason, it was the same to dig a hole in the ground. It seemed that he had no other choice. Landing back on the ground, Chen Guang took a deep breath, and his expression instantly became exceptionally solemn. He took another 10 steps back and slowly adjusted his breathing. The terrifying inner energy flowed through his body like a raging river. The inner strength that was rushing through every meridian in his body could be described as a tangible river. In reality, there were 3 major realms of muscle, bone, and skin as the dividing line. If the inner strength of a muscle strength martial artist was a small stream, the inner strength of a bone strength martial artist was a tributary of the Yangtze River, and the skin strength martial artist was the main stream of the Yangtze River. As for the internal energy in Chen Guang's body, it could no longer be described as the rivers on Earth. Every meridian was surging with the deep ocean currents of the Pacific Ocean. When all of them were added together, it was equivalent to the movement of half of the Pacific Ocean's water. As he continued to operate his power, the airflow around him was pulled by his qi. First, a small whirlwind was born under his feet. After a while, these small whirlwinds gradually merged together and turned into a tornado that lingered around him. This tornado, with Chen Guang as the center, roared and expanded at a speed visible to the naked eye. After a while, the the whirlwind turned into a giant tornado with a diameter of more than 500 meters. This was only the part close to the ground. The higher it went, the larger the diameter became. In the sky far higher than the earth, the diameter of the tornado even expanded to thousands of kilometers. The yin and yang qi in the Zhen Wujie followed the traction of this tornado. It crazily swarmed from all directions and converged into the tornado. However, the direction was completely opposite to the airflow. From top to bottom, it condensed into the body of Chen Guang at the bottom. The strong airflow took away the soil around Chen Guang, and even the ground around him gradually sunk. After half an hour, he actually created a mountain. The shape of this mountain was very strange. Its diameter was only 100 meters. The top of the mountain seemed to have been flattened by a knife. The shape of the whole mountain was like an upside-down ice cream cone. The mountain wall below was also flattened. If it went forward, it would hit the light curtain. It couldn't go any further. The light curtain that was hidden under the ground was gradually revealed. At this time, the ground had been sucked away by at least 500 meters by the tornado created by Chen Guang. However, the bottom still couldn't be seen. Only God knew how deep it was under the light curtain. Chen Guang didn't even make a move. He just accumulated his strength to create such power. With the continuous infusion of the yin and yang qi of the Zhen Wujie, Chen Guang's body shape and appearance gradually changed. He looked more and more like himself on earth. It seemed that because of the gradual deepening of his integration with the Zhen Wujie, the transformation of the game system was gradually suppressed by his own strength. After a while, Chen Guang finally completely restored his appearance and body shape in the outside world. When the energy in his body surged to the point that he couldn't control it, he finally shouted and punched forward. This punch came out of nowhere. The explosive strength was first compressed to the extreme. Then, it turned into a snow-white strength and bombarded forward. This strength did not look very big. However, it had condensed all the yin and yang qi within a radius of thousands of kilometers in the Zhen Wujie. It had already been compressed to the extreme. The strength brazenly bombarded the light curtain. A loud sound spread, and the light curtain shook violently. Ripples began to appear on its surface. They spread in a circle around the place that was bombarded. The light curtain lasted for less than 10 seconds. Finally, a hole that could fit one person was broken. Chen Guang's toes bounced off the ground and he fiercely rushed forward. He rushed through the hole the moment it reformed. When he passed through the light curtain, he was shocked by the scene in front of him. A moment ago, he was still in the cold and damp depths of the terminating thought valley. However, it was only a thin wall. It was as if he had arrived in another world. Here, birds were singing, flowers were fragrant, and the sun was shining brightly. As far as the eye could see, it was a beautiful scene. The air was filled with a complicated and difficult to understand aura. This wasn't a real aura, but some kind of power that contained rules. This power was like the power of the Holy Grail. It was also like the third power that formed the light curtain. At the same time, it felt like the yin and yang qi of the Zhen Wujie. At the same time, it was mixed with the divine power of the gods. Chen Guang raised his hands slightly. Lightning flashed on his fingertips. The divine power of the gods was also mixed. God knew how many divine powers of the gods were left in it. Among them, the most obvious ones were much more tyrannical than ordinary divine powers. As for the lightning on his fingertips, it belonged to his old acquaintance, Yuting. Looking up, the light pillar that he saw in the 9th holy city still stood in the sky not far away. There was a black shadow slowly floating in the light pillar. It seemed that the light pillar that he saw before did not disappear. Instead, it was transferred to this light curtain by that mysterious power. Perhaps it was transferred to another space. This fairyland-like place should be the transfer station from the Zhen Wujie to the endless god realm. Then, the gods here should be much stronger than in the game. This could be seen from the fact that Yuting's remaining divine power could still condense lightning on his fingertips. Chen Guang took a deep breath. No matter what, he could not accept the fate of being trapped in the Zhen Wujia forever with everyone. So, no matter the outcome, since he was caught, there would be a place for him to stand. With that in mind, he flew forward. In less than 5 minutes, he stopped abruptly. This was probably the last trace of Wenwen's battle that he had seen so far. The ground was full of holes from the fierce battle. Wenwen seemed to have unleashed the peak strength of a martial emperor. Judging from the marks on the ground, Chen Guang could even conclude that Wenwen's strength was infinitely close to his before he broke through to the martial sage realm. But in the end, she was not the master of the heavenly Holy Grail. No matter how talented she was, she lacked the most important thing compared to him. Looking at the back of the dead but still holding the long sword in one hand, Chen Guang suddenly felt as if many things had been taken out of his heart. In the end, he was still one step too late. She died in battle. Chapter 1282. If Wenwen had died in the real world, Chen Guang did not know how hysterical he would be. But now, even though he knew that this was just a game, even though he knew that Wenwen would still be safe and sound in the real world, and that all her memories of this game would be stripped away, Chen Guang still felt an indescribable coldness in his heart as he looked at her back. He did not even need to get close to see her face. Even though they had not seen each other for a long time, the image of her in green clothes and holding the black saber in her hand was unforgettable. It was not hard to imagine what kind of fierce battle she had experienced before she died. Perhaps before coming here, she did not think that it would be so dangerous. With her strength of a martial emperor who was close to the martial saint realm, even if she could not kill the Protoss, she should be more than enough to protect herself. But once she passed through the light curtain and entered this mysterious place, the power of the Protoss would suddenly increase. With Wenwen's cultivation, it would be very dangerous. Chen Guang went to the front of Wenwen and looked at her face, which was still glaring angrily. Unexpectedly, there were not many wounds on her body, and her clothes were not very damaged. But with Chen Guang's perception, he did not need to reach out to check her breathing to know that she had been dead for a while. There was not the slightest trace of vitality in her body, only a decisive aura of death. Her protective chi was directly broken by a tyrannical divine power, and she died instantly. An inexplicable breeze blew, and Wenwen, who was standing in front of Chen Guang, began to slowly turn into countless fine dust under this breeze, and drifted away. Chen Guang raised his hand, trying to grab something, but he could only feel the breeze and the fine dust that Wenwen's body had turned into gently passing through his fingertips. At this moment, he felt complicated and incomprehensible. He was a little sad, a little resentful, and unwilling, but more than that, he was grateful. In his mind, he had already sorted out the ins and outs of the entire matter. The situation that the mysterious force manipulated in the dark was originally foolproof. It had forcibly created such a city for the divine race in the true martial domain, which was under the control of the entire world. At the same time, perhaps it was because of the innate ability of humans to adapt to the outside world, or perhaps it was because everyone's mind was secretly manipulated. However, the human players had gradually become addicted to the true martial domain during these 50 years, and they were unable to extricate themselves. The identity of the immortal elder, the temptation of immortality, was enough to make many people crazy with excitement. Even though they were worried about their families in the outside world, the players who entered this world were like the people around Chen Guang, unconsciously ignored many things that should not be abandoned. Chen Guang might be the only one sober, but it was useless. He couldn't even change the minds of Tang Ying, Zhuo Jingxi, Chu Zijin, and Lu Fei, not to mention the others. The mysterious power seemed to be manipulating everything in the deepest subconscious of the players' hearts. It was manipulated by external objects, words, and even hypnosis. Otherwise, even if Chen Guang used a mental cultivation technique, he wouldn't be able to resist it. But in the end, there was someone else who was awake. It was none other than Wenwen, whom he had not seen for a long time. He had planned to look for her through her classmates in the real world after the world in the cup was over. Chen Guang even felt that she might have discovered something long before the jump barrier was triggered, when Wenwen started to disappear. Only after entering this world within Cup would she do this with such a clear goal. He resolutely refused to meet me, and used 50 years to crazily increase his cultivation to the peak of the martial emperor realm in the true martial world. Then, he appeared here at the most critical moment. Qin Guang speculated that if it wasn't for Wenwen's timely appearance, perhaps he wouldn't have been able to see the strange pillar of light that shot up into the sky, and the earthquake wouldn't have spread outside, so he wouldn't have been able to find this place. He was sure that the Protoss didn't expect someone to suddenly break in at this time. They had waited for 50 years, prepared for 50 years, and had always been very stable. They were planning to quietly leave, and slightly relax their vigilance, but they didn't expect someone to break in at the last moment, and coincidentally step on the last node of the space teleportation. The result of this situation was that the smuggling operation, which should have been completed quietly, was leaked. The pillar of light that shot up into the sky was indeed the escape channel of the Protoss. The process should have been completed secretly in this mysterious place, but it was detected by Qin Guang, who was in the outside world. He watched as Wenwen passed away, and tried to figure out what had happened in his mind. Perhaps there were some differences in the details, but the context of the matter should be similar. Qin Guang took a deep breath. He still remembered that when he was weak, in school, or in the internet cafes outside the school, she was always there to protect him. Now that he had become the #1 martial artist in the world, the master of the transcending heaven Holy Grail, and the invincible martial saint in this true martial domain, he was so eager to get her to come to his side. Although the two of them had already broken through that layer of window paper, Qin Guang's heart was not really because of those dirty thoughts, but purely because he felt that she was safe and at ease by his side. In the end, he never expected that she already had her own ideas, and even made a decision from the very beginning. She must not be like the others who were muddle-headed, but knew from the beginning that this was a trap, and then used 50 years of experience to send the most important signal to him at the most critical moment. Qin Guang's gaze slowly moved forward, and after passing through the light curtain, the aura that originally suppressed his mental strength slowly faded, and in his mind's eye, a huge divine inscription matrix gradually appeared. From his side, it extended all the way to the still bright pillar of light in the distance. Looking from afar, this divine inscription matrix was a standard circle, and the boundary of the circle was right under Qin Guang's feet, extending at a slight angle all the way to the distance. From this arc, the position of the center of the circle was clearly that pillar of light that soared into the sky. Looking down again, the place where Wenwen was previously standing was slowly forming a matrix within a matrix. This should be one of the matrix's eyes. Presumably, she had stepped on this matrix's eye, and temporarily broke the stability of the divine inscription matrix, which caused the opponent's plan to go down the drain. No longer hesitating, Qin Guang broke into a run, and directly rushed towards that pillar of light. As the saying goes, see the mountain, see the horse run to death, this was probably his current situation. Looking from afar, that pillar of light was very clear, as if it was very close, but when he really intended to run in that direction, he discovered that it was at least 100 miles away. Fortunately, Qin Guang recovered quickly. Although that punch just now had consumed most of his strength, it seemed that after entering this mysterious space, his strength had also recovered at a speed far faster than usual with the help of the strange energy formed by the 4 strange energies mixed together. As he ran, he was puzzled in his heart. Logically speaking, this rule energy should be greatly beneficial to the God clan, but why was it that he also felt as if he was bathing in a hot spring, and his whole body felt very comfortable? Furthermore, he had a faint feeling that it was impossible for him to continue breaking through to the martial saint realm, and was faintly loosening. Could it be that my cultivation could still increase? He was simply indescribably shocked. No one knew better than him that the martial saint realm was already the strongest strength that the entire true force domain could accommodate, and had already completely reached the upper limit, touching the ceiling. The moment he became a martial saint, his entire person had already become a part of the true force domain. Of course, it could also be said that the true force domain had become a part of him. Now, it was still getting stronger, and he himself did not know what kind of state it would be after the martial saint realm. However, at this moment, he did not have time to figure out what was so strange about this matter. He only rushed forward like a cannonball, bringing up a strong gust of wind behind him, and looked like a sprinting sports car. Boom! There was a loud noise, and Chen Guang's feet left 2 long marks on the ground. He had finally reached his destination. However, the scene that appeared in front of him was not what he had imagined. He had thought that the God clan was retreating, and the scene should be quite chaotic. However, at this moment, there were 999 God clan members standing here in a strict formation, and they had an orderly bearing. There were exactly 999 people, no more, no less. Among them, Divine Emperor Yuting and Divine Emperor 8 Directions, the 2 experts that Chen Guang had met once before, stood in the front of the formation, but there were 6 other people standing side by side with them. Chen Guang remembered that Liuli had once mentioned that she was one of the 10 strongest divine emperors in the endless god realm, and that Yuting's strength was vaguely above hers, and definitely not weaker than hers. Now, it seemed that since the other 6 divine emperors could stand side by side with Yuting, it meant that their strength was not inferior to Yuting's. 8 of the 10 divine emperors had come, and all of them were standing here. What a surprise. I originally thought that as divine emperors, you should leave first. After all, in my world, it has always been popular to let the leader leave first. As Chen Guang spoke, he looked up at the light pillar behind the God clan, and there were still humanoid figures flying up one after another. Yuting took a step forward. We have no intention of leaving, Chen Guang interrupted him. I know what you want to say. This is a trap, right? It wasn't a trap, but something happened at the last minute, so you will probably die here. Yuting smiled, as if he was talking about a trivial matter. Chen Guang pretended to be surprised. Don't you know that you can't kill me in the game dimension? The 8 divine emperors next to Yuting said impatiently, what's with all the nonsense? We have our own methods, there's no need for you to worry about it. Where's the ancient well? Where is it? Chen Guang didn't mind being offended by the 8 divine emperors and pretended to be calm. It's already been destroyed by us, so just give up. The 8 divine emperors impatiently waved their hands. Chen Guang, however, could tell from their expressions that they were bluffing. Destroyed? You can't do that, can you? If the ancient well could be destroyed so easily, why would they waste so much effort to take it away? That thing was a mission item for the realm within a cup, protected by the core laws of the Holy Grail, so it couldn't be destroyed. Even the noble gods are full of lies. It seems that the so-called gods are nothing more than this. Since you were planning to ambush me, and I was planning to kill you, then let's do it now. Since they couldn't come to an agreement, Chen Guang's expression suddenly changed, and he made the first move. The one who strikes first gains the upper hand, and the one who strikes last suffers. Right now, he was fearless. Chapter 1283. When he first obtained the heavenly Holy Grail, he never thought that he would one day have to fight against 999 Protoss in this cup. After all, in his mind, the so-called Protoss should be a lofty and incomparably majestic existence. Although the Yuting Divine Emperor and the others standing in front of him were still powerful, they were far inferior to the kind of power that Chen Guang felt from Luli. Although they were called divine emperors, they felt no different from mortals. Chen Guang understood the reason. It was probably because this was the heavenly Holy Grail's world in the cup. What they appeared here was not their real bodies, but just their projections. The formation of these projections should have to abide by some rules of the world. Just like the natives of the true martial domain, their projections could not display the divine power and ability of their real bodies. Moreover, they were contaminated with many characteristics that belonged to humans, which could also be called weaknesses. That was emotional, which could also be understood as joy, anger, sorrow, and joy. According to Chen Guang's original understanding, he thought that he would one day clear the heavenly Holy Grail step by step. Then, he would fight his way into the endless divine realm and fight against the other Protoss. But now, this situation suddenly appeared in front of him. He had no choice but to face it head-on. According to Yuting's words, Chen Guang deduced that they were not ready either. Since that was the case, everyone was actually on the same starting line. If they were to fight, then let's fight. In the blink of an eye, he had already rushed in front of nearly 1,000 Protoss. He raised his arm and waved his palm. As the wind from his palm rose, a crimson palm shadow that covered 100 miles appeared out of thin air. It covered the sky and covered the earth, covering the place where the Protoss stood. After the crimson palm shadow appeared, it instantly turned from nothingness to reality. In less than a breath's time, it turned into a giant magma palm that covered 100 miles of sky. That's right, it was magma. It looked like stone, but it was burning with burning blue flames. It was covered with cracks, but it was exceptionally sturdy. How did it feel to have a giant magma palm that covered 100 miles of land pressing down on top of one's head? How strong was the pressure? In fact, any of the gods present here could unleash a power that was billions of times stronger than this in the endless god realm. Rationally, they looked down on Qinguang's so-called all-out palm strike. But now, deep in their hearts, they were trembling uncontrollably. This palm strike was so powerful that even Qinguang himself was caught off guard. Although he had made the first move, intending to use his full strength in one strike, according to his own impression, the fiery rock palm that he was currently using was clearly known for its condensed strength. How could it possibly cover 100 miles in one strike? Wasn't this nonsense? When did I become so excited? Forget it, it's not important. It's always a good thing that I've become stronger. Following this momentum, Qinguang pressed his hand down. The giant rock palm in the air was completely synchronized with his movements, coming down from above. The 999 gods standing on the ground took a deep breath. They immediately used all sorts of methods and joined forces to counterattack. Qinguang cursed, "You people call yourselves gods. How dare you bully a mere mortal like me with numbers?" The 8 god emperors said indifferently, "When killing a traitor, only the result matters, not the process. If one person kills you, you'll be killed. If 10 people kill you, you'll still be killed. If all of you attack together, you'll still be killed. Your shamelessness is similar to this old man's style in the past, but it doesn't mean anything." Before Qinguang even finished speaking, the giant palm had already arrived above the gods' heads. In an instant, the ground below was filled with all sorts of colors. Yuting transformed into a bolt of lightning and condensed the lightning around him. A lightning spear appeared in his hand and pierced towards Qinguang's palm with a dazzling bolt of lightning. The eyes of the 8 god emperors shone with divine light. 2 rays of golden light shot out from his eyes and condensed into a jade-like square seal above his head. The bottom of the square seal stood on the ground, enveloping the 8 god emperors. Then, it grew into the sky. In the blink of an eye, the top of the square seal was pressed against the magma palm. The others also had their own methods. Some turned into flames, some turned into ice sculptures, and some bent over and slammed their palms on the ground to create a mound of earth. There were even non-human god emperors who simply revealed their true forms, transforming into various elemental creatures or legendary divine beasts. The so-called true gods actually didn't have any fixed style for their moves, nor did they have a clear name for their moves. Generally speaking, they were the most basic ways to control their own power. The god race's cultivation methods and rules were not as orderly and clear as the human race's inherited cultivation methods. Most of them followed the power and rules they controlled to search for more original power. For example, Yuting had cultivated the power of lightning from the beginning. When he was still a low-level mortal god, he might have mastered some thunder technique or thunder summoning art. But when he became a god emperor, he no longer needed to be bound by any techniques or routines. Instead, he wandered freely in the rules of the power of lightning. In the endless divine realm, every power had its own corresponding rules. As a god, if he wanted to obtain more power, he had to constantly perfect the rules he controlled. Of course, everyone had their own ways of perfecting their own rules. Yuting's method was to collect billions of types of lightning in the divine realm and fuse the different characteristics of each type into his own. If one day, he could gather all the strange thunders in the endless divinity world and even the lower planes, and master all of them. He might be able to control the laws, surpass the realm of God Emperor, and become the next master god. At this moment, the gods present were displaying the different nomological powers that they each controlled. Previously in the True Force domain or other game spaces, because the rules in the Heavenly Holy Grail were completely different from the endless divine realm, and the power of the Holy Grail suppressed them, they couldn't even exert a billionth of their power. Now, in this transitional zone between the True Force domain and the endless divine realm, the gods who stayed here could finally relax a little and exert a billionth of their power. Although it was still a far cry from their original bodies, it was already 100 times stronger than before. Not only that, as the gods exerted their power in unison, their power resonated inexplicably infused into one, turning into a picture scroll that looked like a divine realm. There were mountains, water, and even flowers, birds, insects, and fish in this picture scroll. At first, the divine realm displayed by this picture scroll was very small, as if there was only a mountain and a valley. But perhaps after only a millionth of a second, the picture scroll's area grew countless times. The picture scroll was still the same size, but the scenery inside had become thousands of mountains and rivers, and there were even cities dotting it. There were no roads between the cities, but only 2 or 3 airships flew in the sky from time to time. Rather than saying they were airships, they were more like magic treasures. Another millionth of a second passed, and the picture scroll finally collided with Chen Guang's giant lava palm. There was no sound, and the scene that should have been like Mars colliding with Earth was frighteningly quiet. The giant lava palm melted at a speed visible to the naked eye, like snow being exposed to the scorching sun. But after melting, the lava that should have flowed down inexplicably disappeared, only turning into little sparks of fire that slid down, and then suddenly disappeared into thin air. As for the picture scroll that was formed by the power of the gods, there were countless crimson raindrops falling from the sky, completely losing heat in mid-air, turning into volcanic ash like dust. Chen Guang stopped and looked at the slowly fading picture scroll, his eyes unprecedentedly solemn. What appeared in front of him was a huge black palm print that covered 100 miles, still emitting bursts of black smoke, but in the middle of the palm print, there were 2 places that were safe and sound. One of them was the place where the gods stood, and the other was a straight line cut out by the light beam. When his giant lava palm came into contact with the light pillar in the air, it also silently and completely dissipated. He thought that he could borrow the power of the realm of true force here, and use the power of the realm to suppress the opponent. Even if the opponent was 999 gods, he was not afraid, but he did not expect that all 999 gods were god emperors, and he did not expect that when 999 god emperors joined hands, they could produce a resonance and evolve the picture scroll of the realm of gods. Chen Guang had the power of the realm of gods, and the opponent in front of him also had the power of the realm of gods, and the opponent evolved the endless realm of gods, which was several levels higher than the realm of true force. He was suppressed in the realm, and he did not have the upper hand in terms of the total amount of strength. Although Chen Guang was floating in the air at this time, he was not in a good situation at all. I really believe you. When he heard Lu Li mention the name of the top 10 god emperors of the realm of gods, Chen Guang thought that there were at most dozens of god emperors in the endless realm of gods. Who would have thought that there were only 8 of the top 10 here, and the other 999 were all the same? If it was a one-on-one fight, he was not afraid of anyone. Otherwise, even if they really had 999 god emperors, he could exhaust them one by one. But he really could not stand these people. This was only the first move, and you guys are like the 6 gods in the anime, always giving me the body fusion technique of 999 people. It is fine if you guys come at me together, but you guys still give me this. Are you worthy of your identity? Forget it, why should I care about a group of projections here? I am afraid that their real bodies have no shame, and these are just mere projections, let alone think about it. In the blink of an eye, Chen Guang attacked again. Since the fire rock palm did not work, Chen Guang simply changed the method, and tried the ice destruction technique of the 400,000 unique techniques. An instant later, he chopped down from above with a whirlwind kick. Countless ice crystals appeared out of thin air and shot toward the ground like bullets. This technique was one of the 400,000 unique techniques of Qin Guang, but in the real world, his cultivation was too low to use it. Only in this true martial domain, with the help of the yin and yang qi, he could mobilize the power of heaven and earth to achieve this effect. This ice destruction technique looked like the ice storm in fantasy novels, but the speed of Qin Guang from preparing to the actual move was much faster. This was the biggest difference between martial arts and magic. Nearly 1,000 god race people also responded to the moves, not panicking in the face of changes. In the face of Qin Guang's different methods, the gods also came up with different ways to deal with it. This time, about half of the god race people who believed that their defense was strong enough chose to resist in place, while the other half used various methods to flash in all directions. Strangely, as the gods used their divine powers in unison, their powers resonated once again. After the colorful power of the god emperors who stayed in place was mobilized, they inexplicably gathered together on their own, turning into a chaotic halo that covered their heads. This chaotic halo circled and rotated, looking like a nebula. The ice crystals that Qin Guang shot out fell on the nebula, and the terrifying momentum suddenly disintegrated, turning into sparkles of light that merged into this nebula. As for the other half of the god emperors who were dispersing, most of them were on the periphery of the formation. When they flew up, there was also a stream of light that swept across the top of each god emperor's head, evolving into a ring above their heads. Qin Guang saw it clearly. Yes, it was a ring. It looked like Saturn's ring, very weak, but it sucked in his ice crystals. His seemingly powerful ice destruction had only added a little color to the ring, added a few more colors to the nebula of the other half of the god emperor, and conveniently extinguished the smoke that was rising from the black palm print that he had left behind. This was very embarrassing. Qin Guang froze in place for a long time. He took the initiative to attack, but the 2 consecutive moves did nothing. Ever since he came to the realm of true force, he had never encountered such a situation. At this time, he was not the only one who was shocked, the god emperors were also very surprised. It was not that they had never encountered a situation similar to the divine power resonance in the endless divine realm, but it was relatively rare. So when it appeared for the first time, they were very calm. The god emperors were also smart people. When 999 smart people were together, they could think of things and do things together without eye contact. They intended to leave an illusion to Qin Guang, so that Qin Guang would think that their joint attack was deliberate. After all, although the 8 god emperors said it very easily, as if they could kill Qin Guang with a raise of their hand, but when the fire rock palm was used, the god emperors knew that in this realm of true force, especially in this transitional place, Qin Guang's strength was also very strong. After all, they were not here in person, but only projections. They did not have inexhaustible divine power, nor did they have the energy to destroy the world. On the other side, after 2 consecutive moves failed, Qin Guang also felt that things were difficult to deal with, so he did not take the initiative to attack again. He planned to delay. It had been about half an hour since he passed through the light curtain and entered here. Although the feeling was very subtle, the strength of his body was indeed slowly increasing. The feeling of becoming stronger was hidden very deeply, and it was even difficult to notice, but it really existed. Qin Guang clearly felt that there was a strange power drilling into his body from the countless pores all over his body. He couldn't even block it. This so-called strange power was the mixture of divine power, the power of the Holy Grail, the yin-yang aura, and a fourth, higher-level power that he had never come into contact with before. This feeling was actually very bad, as if things had become out of his control. But the 999 god emperors in front of him were indeed strong enemies. Instead of forcefully resisting, it was better to let nature take its course and become stronger, so that he could solve the problem in front of him first. Yu Ting and the 8 god emperors also noticed his current predicament, so they decided to change from defense to offense. What kind of scene would it look like when 999 god emperors used their secret techniques to kill someone? It was hard for Qin Guang to describe it, because in the blink of an eye, his whole body was shaken by the golden long sword that suddenly shot from the front. These god emperors are really shameless, aren't they? It's one thing for you to fuse when you block my attack, but why do you have to fuse with everything you do? Damn it, you're clearly either using the fire element, using some mysterious magic of aging, or emitting a green light with green sprouts on top of the green light, or having some strange little people with 3 heads and 6 arms popping out of your belly buttons. But when the strange powers of these god emperors spread out from their bodies, they all mysteriously disappeared, and finally turned into this long sword that could pierce the heavens and pierce the earth, a sword that looked like it could draw a river on the ground. Qin Guang felt that he was not fighting against 999 god emperors. These god emperors were basically living in groups, with collective intelligence. Lord God Emperor, your surname is Jiu, and your given name is 999 god emperors. Chapter 1284. Qin Guang tried to avoid the giant sword, but he changed his mind after a few tries. It seemed to be a combination skill formed by the immortal emperors unconsciously, but there must be someone controlling it secretly. As soon as he moved aside a little, the huge sword slightly adjusted its direction. How was this a divine great sword? It was clearly an unreasonable automatic cruise missile. He couldn't dodge it, so he had to take it head-on. He couldn't rely on earth martial arts like the golden bell shield and iron skin. Even the defensive martial arts he learned from the 400,000 unique skills in the realm of true martial arts were not enough. Was he going to use his trump card so soon? Qin Guang felt helpless. He was only at the beginning. The true martial divine art was his trump card, and he had to reveal it now. He always made decisions quickly, and now he didn't have much time to hesitate. He shook his dantian, and the true martial divine art was fully activated. In an instant, Qin Guang's aura suddenly changed. There wasn't any smile on his face, but it was replaced with a solemn expression. Streams of smoke slowly rose from his body, condensing into a huge shadow behind him. This light shadow slowly took shape. It looked like a human, but in the blink of an eye, it turned into a statue of a god with 6 heads and 12 arms. With Qin Guang as the axis, the statue rose from the ground. At first, it was only about 100 feet tall, but in the blink of an eye, a second statue appeared behind it. The second statue was about 1,000 feet tall, but it wasn't over yet. A third statue appeared behind the second statue. In the short time that the giant sword slashed towards Qin Guang, 9 illusions appeared behind Qin Guang. Each of the 9 phantoms was taller than the last, and they looked even more ferocious and terrifying. The 9th one was a giant green huaxia dragon whose length could be calculated in the nth power of 10. Even Qin Guang was shocked at first, but he soon calmed down. The statues behind him looked strange, but they were all powerful deities and divine beasts that he had imagined in this life. As a descendant of China and the representative of China, the image of the Chinese divine dragon was deeply rooted in everyone's heart, and Qin Guang wasn't an exception. The gods led by Divine Emperor Yu Ting immediately tensed up when they saw this. However, they were also very confident in the golden longsword that they had formed together. For a moment, the emotions of mortals clouded the minds of the deities. They were confident, but also had a bad feeling that they might not be able to defeat their opponent. Gods had always been fearless. When their hearts began to worry, the divinity of the projections they left in this place would unwittingly weaken and be replaced by humanity. The Xinhuang were affected by the characteristics of mortals. Under the nervous gaze of the deities, the golden sword finally slashed at the front of the shadows, where Qin Guang was standing. In an instant, the 9 phantoms behind Qin Guang moved at the same time. First, the first phantasm bent down and clasped its fists at the massive sword. With a poochie sound, the statue's fists were cut open like tofu dregs. The second statue with 6 heads and 12 arms stretched out a total of 12 fists to hit the sword, but it was useless. Finally, the last dragon-shaped divine statue that was standing proudly in the sky lowered its body to the ground. It condensed its body and opened its mouth to bite the giant sword. At the same time, it continuously spat out green origin beads. The energy beads hit the blade of the sword again and again. Coupled with the bite of the dragon-shaped idol, the golden sword finally collapsed in the air. Qin Guang took a deep breath as lightning flickered in his eyes. He wanted to take advantage of his opponent's weakness to take his life. Taking advantage of the fact that he had regained the upper hand, he once again took the initiative to attack. However, this time, he didn't make a big move. Instead, he gathered all his strength into his physical body and pounced towards the center of the gods. Since the big attack didn't work, he'd take them down one by one. Close combat was about to break out at any moment. Perhaps it had been a long time since the gods had gotten used to fighting in close combat instead of using divine power. Other than Yu Ting and a few of the strongest 10 great god emperors in the 8 directions, the rest of the gods performed exceptionally poorly. At this moment, Qin Guang's attacks no longer looked as mighty as before. But that was because he had gathered all his power. Although it looked like a simple punch, kick, or even a slash from his palm, the might was stronger than his previous attacks. But after fighting like this for about 10 minutes, he stopped again. He couldn't figure it out. He was at least 30% stronger than when he was in the realm of true force. What he used was a simple but powerful killing technique. What he used was the true force divine technique that he was most proud of. But he couldn't kill a single person. No matter who he hit, at the same time, protective forces would appear on the bodies of 999 god emperors and the places where they were hit. For example, he once punched Yu Ting's shoulder. But the shoulders of the other 999 Shenhuang all shook at the same time. The counterforce of his fist didn't seem to be from a single Shenhuang. Instead, it was a counterattack from all of them at the same time. He wanted to curse. He had seen shameless people, but he had never seen someone as shameless as this. The deities also understood. Although they didn't know how such a deep resonance was triggered, it wasn't a bad thing after all. Chapter 1285. In the past, his internal energy and the innate ability of the earth-paced exploder belonged to 2 different systems. The 2 of them vaguely complemented each other, but Qin Guang never imagined that there would be a day when the 2 of them would fuse together. Even if there was such a disaster, Qin Guang felt that it should be the talent of the earth burster that swallowed the internal force, not the other way around. After all, he had heard from Luli that although the name of the earth burster was not elegant, its rank was a real god emperor in the heavenly realm. He himself was the one and only soy sauce popper, but Liuli once joked with him, saying that if he gave birth to a baby in the endless god realm and a soy sauce popper fell to the ground, the baby would definitely be born as a god emperor, just a weaker one. But if it could live to adulthood, it might not reach the realm of the 10 great god emperors, but it would not be too far away. Qin Guang did not take it seriously at that time and protested that he was a man. How could he give birth to a baby? You, Luli, help me. Because of this joke, he even gave Luli a beating. But in retrospect, he felt that Luli seemed to be joking, but it did emphasize once again how high the level of the earth burster was. Therefore, Qin Guang had always had great expectations for the talent of the earth burster. But he never expected that the talent of the earth burster would be swallowed by the internal force. This was not scientific. Internal force originated from the martial arts on earth. Since ancient times, the most powerful martial artists were only in the master realm. Not to mention breaking the void, they might not even be able to rush out of the earth. The gap between internal force and elemental talent could not be measured by reason. It was not like a snake swallowing an elephant, but an ant swallowing an elephant. But now it had really happened. His situation doesn't look right. The God Emperor's observation was so keen that Yu Ting immediately noticed Qin Guang's abnormality. Another one of the 10 great God Emperors nodded. We don't need to be polite with him. This is our chance. If this drags on, I'm afraid there will be unforeseen events. Logically speaking, it would take at least some time for 999 people to come to a consensus, but the gods themselves did not notice it. In just a few words, they came to a consensus and attacked again. At this time, Qin Guang was at the stage where the 2 powers were fusing. He opened his eyes and watched as the power once again emerged from where the gods stood, and then watched as their power condensed into a mountain. This mountain peak was extremely steep. Although it only appeared to be several hundred feet tall, it gave Qin Guang an extremely strong sense of oppression. This is the residence of the Master God of Chaos. We actually summoned the phantom image of the chaotic peak. One of the divine emperors immediately pointed out the origin of this mountain. The primal chaos peak has been floating in the skies of the god realm for countless years. Who knows how many master gods of primal chaos divine wills have stained its surface? How can we possibly summon it out? I'm afraid it's just another divine mountain that's slightly similar, right? This time, a voice of opposition could be heard from the crowd. Yuting said, "That's not right. I've been to the chaotic peak before. In the middle of the mountain, there's an entire area that has been dyed pure white by the divine power of the Master God of Chaos. Look at this mountain." The gods looked up and followed Yuting's finger. Indeed, they saw that ring of pure white. It was just a simple white, but this white was not the white it was. As Qin Guang looked at it, he instantly lost consciousness. It was as if countless thoughts had suddenly appeared in his mind. These thoughts belonged to him, but they also did not listen to him. Mysterious lines scattered in his mind along with these thoughts, but then turned into something that was both tangible and intangible. When he imagined himself reaching out to grab it, these lines scattered like smoke. Then, for some reason, fragments of memories appeared in Qin Guang's mind. It was very difficult for him to describe what these memories were about. Whenever he tried to think hard, his mind would feel empty. However, if he deliberately ignored them, he would feel that these thoughts and memories were everywhere. It was like an earthling walking on the street. If someone patted him on the shoulder and asked him what 1 + 1 equals, he would immediately answer that it was equal to 2. It was the same logic. If Qin Guang had been to the endless divine realm, he would know that the ring of white on the mountain represented one of the laws controlled by the Master God of Chaos. The muddled memories that appeared in his mind were actually his understanding of these laws. The so-called laws represented the fundamental operating rules of a world. For example, in the universe where Earth resided, some of the most basic laws would always exist. As small as the interaction between atoms and molecules, as large as the gravitational force between planets in a stellar system, or as large as the Milky Way's flat surface instead of a sphere, the Milky Way's body was not a sphere. Why did the speed of light have to be 300,000 kilometers per second? Why did the trajectories of ions on a microscopic scale all appear spherical, but on a galaxy, they appear flat? In every universe or plane, the most fundamental hidden laws determined everything in that plane. At this moment, Qin Guang was unbelievably able to see through one of the laws of the divine realm in his human form. Even if it was just an unremarkable piece of the laws controlled by the Master God of Chaos, his realm had already completely surpassed that of an ordinary god-emperor. Just as he was lost in thought, the chaotic peak had already risen into the sky and came crashing down on him. The shadow of the Master God's residence was indeed different. As soon as the chaotic peak moved, countless pitch-black cracks appeared out of nowhere in the place where the mountain was. The power of the chaotic peak's shadow was not something that a mere plane between the true martial realm and the endless divine realm could withstand. A slight movement would cause the structure of the space to become unstable and cracks would appear. By the time Qin Guang regained his senses, the primal chaos peak had already crashed into him. Qin Guang felt as if he was still a mortal and his stomach was hit by an F1 car at 300 kilometers per hour. His entire body was flattened. That's right, flattened. He became an unremarkable human figure stuck on the chaotic peak. The thickness of his entire body was not more than 2 millimeters. More than half of his body was sucked into the cracks in the space. Even with his current sturdy body, his body was constantly being torn apart by the cracks in the space. He was even being sucked into the cracks. If Qin Guang's Earth Explosion's innate ability was still there, he wouldn't have to panic so much. Even if he only had a strand of hair left, he would still be able to revive with full health. But this innate ability of his was just gone. He was a little flustered. However, as soon as this thought arose in his mind, a light cracking sound came from his body. Chen Guang knew that his new version of inner strength had sensed the danger of life and death and was operating on its own. He didn't know if he could withstand it. His mind was a little worried. He forced his eyes open, but all he saw was a vast expanse of whiteness. Strange, is this a coincidence? The place where he collided with the chaotic peak was actually precisely on the white zone on the mountainside. The distance was even closer. To be precise, it was zero distance. The infusion of laws that had happened once before came back to him once again. This time, when he completely came back to his senses, the chaotic peak had already disappeared. He didn't even know what he had done. He only vaguely remembered that when the new version of inner strength surged in his body, there were many more inexplicable memories and fragments in his mind. Unlike the haze from before, he could even vaguely see a human figure this time. This human figure's face couldn't be seen clearly. He couldn't even tell if it was a man or a woman. He seemed to be slowly approaching from the void. His movements seemed to be struggling. This human figure was clearly standing very straight and his steps were very steady. However, for some reason, Chen Guang felt that he was in great pain. Gradually, the human figure overlapped with the body in Chen Guang's mind. Chen Guang turned around and only saw the back of the human figure slowly dissipating in the intense light. Then, he opened his eyes. The gods who were standing not far away from him were completely dumbfounded. Right before their eyes, that fellow who was supposed to be dead had suddenly regained his human form. Then, he raised his hand and caressed the chaos peak in a seemingly gentle manner. That's right, it was just a touch. He didn't even use any force. Then, the chaotic peak directly collapsed. He was still floating in the same place, and his aura was even stronger. The chaotic peak, which had high hopes placed on it, couldn't even leave any injuries on him, let alone kill him. This guy even arrogantly closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, the gods met his gaze for a brief moment. He actually wanted to turn his head away subconsciously. What a joke. Although we are all just projections and only have 1/1000th of the original's power, how could we not even be able to withstand the gaze of a mortal? On the other side, Chen Guang raised his hand again. This time, the gods immediately noticed something different. Chen Guang raised his right palm with his palm facing up. A cyclone the size of a bowling ball floated above his palm. At a glance, the cyclone wasn't big and didn't look scary. However, in the eyes of the God Emperor, it was completely abnormal. Although Chen Guang was strong previously, the level of power he used was still considered inferior inner strength in their eyes. It was just that he had an overwhelming advantage in terms of quantity, which was why they had to work together to fight against him. But now, the cyclone in his palm contained divine power. Moreover, it was extremely pure. In terms of realm, it wasn't any weaker than the God Emperor. The name Martial God Realm that Chen Guang came up with was not in vain. He now understood. As the saying goes, all roads lead to Rome. Under the rules of the endless divine realm, no matter what kind of power evolved to the extreme, it would be tainted with the characteristics of divine power. He broke through the martial saint realm and became a martial god. His inner strength evolved further and became divine power. He just didn't know how his divine power level was. Compared to the God Emperor, was there a big difference? Forget it, it's useless to think so much. I'll know after I try. Chen Guang took a deep breath. He shook his wrist and threw the cyclone in his right palm like throwing a bowling ball. His move reminded him of an anime he had seen before. It was very similar to the Rasengan in Naruto. But my Rasengan doesn't need to be held in my hand. I can throw it. The gods looked serious. This time, no one chose to avoid it. Instead, they condensed the divine realm projection scroll again. Then, the spiral force crashed into the scroll like a huge stone thrown into a lake. The thousands of mountains and rivers in the scroll instantly turned into ashes. Even the countless cities and the Protoss living in them were turned into powder. Qin Guang's eyelids twitched. It was like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Chapter 1286. He didn't know if the dead gods in the painting were real or not, but this wasn't the time for him to feel sorry for the state of the universe. The right thing to do was to pursue the enemy while they were victorious. Qin Guang watched as the cyclones charged into the formation of the god emperors. Like bowling pins, they tore dozens of famous god emperors into pieces in an instant. Then, they used up all their energy and slowly dissipated. Although these were only projections and not the real body, the fact that Qin Guang had killed dozens of god emperors in one move still shocked Yu Ting and the others. Even the 10 god emperors felt that if they were the ones standing in front of the cyclones when they were at full power, they probably wouldn't be able to stop it either. But when they turned their attention back to Qin Guang, they wanted to curse him out loud. Qin Guang was still floating there, but compared to before, he had both his hands raised in the air. What was even more hateful was that there were at least 10 similar cyclones floating in front of him at the same time. These cyclones kept tumbling between his hands, as if he could throw them at them at any time. Fortunately, the gods had never seen juggling before. Otherwise, they would immediately recognize that Qin Guang was imitating an acrobat who threw balls. But other people could at most throw 5 or 7 cyclones, but Qin Guang was throwing 15 at the same time. Each of these 15 cyclones was equivalent to a bomb. Moreover, Qin Guang had to continuously use his new inner force to maintain their balance. At the same time, he had to add more fire to the cyclones. It was much more difficult to perform. Everyone, don't panic. The best part is yet to come. Seeing the gods looking at him in shock, Qin Guang grinned and said coldly. As the saying went, those who were not of the same race must have a different heart. Although he didn't know why these god emperors hated him so much, Qin Guang didn't plan to negotiate with them. It was time to put an end to them. As soon as he finished speaking, Qin Guang flicked his fingers. 15 killer weapons, with the same power as the previous cyclones, flew out of his hands and towards the gods. The Yuting gods no longer showed any carelessness on their faces. They finally unleashed all of their trump cards. Yuting's body collapsed with a loud bang. He simply turned into a field of lightning and spread out. It was as if he had covered all the gods. The bodies of the 8 divine emperors collapsed as well. A golden divine seal descended from the sky and enveloped the place where the gods were standing. It was the same for the other 6 divine emperors. Each of them used their own techniques, and in an instant, the platform on which the gods stood was shrouded in a hazy halo. The halo looked like a divine seal in all directions, but it was also covered with Yuting's lightning. It also contained the different powers of the other 6 super-strong god emperors. Below the halo, the bodies of the god race exploded one after another, turning into the most fundamental energy, leaving behind only a wisp of consciousness. In the blink of an eye, the figures of over 900 god emperors disappeared at the same time, leaving only a mirage-like circle of light. The gods here were projections. They were bodies formed by the combination of divine power and rules. They could condense into a physical body, but they could also collapse into fundamental energy. Now, in this transitional zone, divine power was abundant. As long as the divine will of the god race still existed, they could restore their bodies at any time. The dozens of god emperors who had died under Qin Guang's cyclones did not have this chance. The divine will preserved in their projected bodies had been completely crushed into the most fundamental energy, and could no longer be restored. This time, the divine world scroll appeared above the heads of the gods again. It was bigger and clearer. The city that could still be seen before looked like a tiny pixel on the new divine world scroll. However, this pixel was not like a real square on a computer. If one's vision was good enough, they could constantly enlarge things in their eyes. They could still see the panicked god race fleeing in all directions in the city. At this time, Qin Guang could see it clearly. The 15 cyclones he had shot out were about to hit the scroll, but his attention was on the god race in the scroll. Qin Guang just watched as his cyclones crashed into the scroll. In an instant, the mountains and water inside were smashed into pieces. Countless god race scurried around like headless flies. This scene was no better than the scene of humans facing the end of the world in the movies. Qin Guang came to a realization. The so-called Protoss were nothing more than intelligent lifeforms that lived in another world. Perhaps they had a longer lifespan and could fly. Perhaps they had 3 heads and 6 arms and possessed more power. Perhaps even a child could have one or several lower planes for him to play with. Perhaps the plane of a child's toy was as big as the Earth's universe, with the same number of living creatures. But in the face of the crisis of extinction, the god race was no different from humans. On second thought, online games were very popular on Earth nowadays. Many young people had more or less played them. They were either role-playing games like MMORPGs, or the Three Kingdoms strategy games, where players managed a few cities or even a country. There were even Star Wars-type simulation games, where a player could even create an interstellar empire and rule over countless planets. Could it be that what we thought was just a simple game was actually a fictional world and life that actually existed in the first place? Otherwise, if the computer games of this era could be made into a prototype, who knew what the games would be like decades or centuries later? If computers produced artificial intelligence and programs had feelings, the NPCs that were originally set in the game would think that they were really alive. Then, in the eyes of the NPCs in the game, would the players on Earth also be god race? Qin Guang had never thought that he would have so many strange thoughts in his mind when he saw the city, which was as small as a speck of dust, being destroyed. It was so small that a normal person could only see the little people fleeing in panic with a high-powered microscope. It was really strange. If the god race really existed, then in their eyes, he should be the NPC that was created. If they cut off the computer's power supply, they should stop working. Otherwise, if they pulled out the hard drive and threw it into the pool, he, the NPC, would die a horrible death. But now, it was clear that the NPC had rebelled. With a slap, he created a rumbling cyclone. When the cyclone fell into the painting, it became a space-time vortex that could tear everything apart. Then, the god race, who were supposed to be high and mighty, became stray dogs. They were even dragged into the vortex miserably. They were most likely dead. Finally, when the cyclone completely destroyed the painting, Yu Ting and the other god emperors who were standing below were in big trouble. Previously, a single cyclone had killed dozens of god emperors on the spot. Now that a total of 15 cyclones had entered the painting, the circle of light formed by the god emperors became much dimmer in no time. Then, the huge circle of light suddenly exploded, turning into hundreds of small light orbs that scattered in all directions. Qin Guang's cyclone chased after the god race. It did not disperse until it destroyed hundreds of small light orbs. Although he did not see the corpses, Qin Guang knew that he had killed hundreds of god emperors with one slap. He suddenly lost his respect for the god emperors. Even if they were just projections, they were all real god emperors. When Yu Ting and the others reformed their bodies, Qin Guang had a complicated expression on his face. He took a deep breath and said, "The god emperors are nothing more than this." Yu Ting's face no longer had the arrogance from before. Instead, he looked uncertain. "Now, I even suspect that you were deliberately sent here to die," Qin Guang said again. If the god emperors were here in person, no matter what Qin Guang said, they would not be shaken. But now, Yu Ting and the others were only projections, and they were tainted with human characteristics. As soon as Qin Guang said this, the youngest and hot-tempered god emperor of 8 directions immediately gave himself away. His brows were tightly furrowed, and his heart was similarly puzzled. The origin of the divinity world had given them such an important mission. It wanted them to kill the rebels who could shake the foundation of the divinity world, the source of all evil. But why did they only let the mighty god emperors send their projections that were only 10 billionths of the strength of their true selves? Even if the rules were slightly loosened so that their projections could reach 1/10,000th or even 1 billionth of the strength of their true selves, they would not be cut into pieces like vegetables. Although Chen Guang said this provocatively, his eyes never relaxed as he looked at the expressions of the god emperors. At this time, Chen Guang felt very uncomfortable. It was said that people had 7 emotions and 6 desires: joy, anger, sorrow, and joy. This was normal, but now standing in front of him were real gods. These gods were now frowning and pondering like humans, bewildered and uncertain. This meant that their hearts were shaken, and they might even have guessed something. At the same time, something else happened to Chen Guang. The hundreds of god emperors who had died did not leave nothing behind. Instead, like the god race who had died in the slaughtering world, they turned into origin energy and floated in the air. However, they were absorbed by Chen Guang, filtered, and then floated out of his body. This was a very subtle change. Yu Ting and the others could not see it, but Chen Guang knew it. It was not the first time. He was very familiar with it. Previously, when he had just entered the true force realm and killed the 4 god emperors, something similar happened. Chen Guang knew that there must be something extra in his body, but he did not know what it was or what it could be used for. However, this was not the time to think about these things. It was more important to resolve the trouble in front of them first. In any case, you should be on your way now. If I have the chance to go to the divine realm in the future, I don't mind paying you a visit. As he spoke, Chen Guang raised his hand again, but this time, he did not use any of the martial arts he had used before. He clenched his hands into fists and raised them high above his head. The new version of internal strength surged from all over his body and gathered in his fists. Then, it gradually condensed in the air above his fists. This time, it was not a cyclone. Instead, it was like a supernova that had just been bred by the universe. Chen Guang did not know why he came up with this move. It was just a sudden idea in his subconscious. His intuition told him that using this new version of internal strength could achieve the strongest power. He could kill all the god emperors who had been haunting him before. Opposite him, Yu Ting and Ba Feng's expressions changed at the same time when they saw this move. Yu Ting exclaimed, This is. Ba Feng's reaction was more complicated. He seemed to be a little excited and a little afraid. He only murmured, Impossible. This is impossible. Chapter 1287. The other 10 divine emperors did not react as strongly as these 2. Instead, they were puzzled as to why these 2 had suddenly lost their composure. Although they were about to die, they were only projections here. If they were gone, then so be it. It would indeed affect their true bodies, but not to the extent of hurting them. It would take at least 1,000,000 years to tens of thousands of years. By then, the divine will lost in these projections would slowly recover. What is the meaning of this? A black-robed female divine emperor could not help but ask. On the other side, Chen Guang was still making his move. Although they did not understand the meaning behind Chen Guang's move, they could tell that it was no small matter just by looking at his posture. Logically speaking, the 8 divine emperors present should immediately join forces and use themselves as a guide to draw the remaining 300 divine emperors to work together. Otherwise, they would die without a doubt. But now, Yu Ting and Ba Feng were not in a stable state of mind and could not control the overall situation. Although the remaining 6 deity emperors could still barely fight back, they couldn't even withstand a single move from Chen Guang. Now that there were only 300 deity emperors left, and Chen Guang was preparing his ultimate move, the 8 peak-level deity emperors would definitely die if they didn't work together. Yu Ting, Ba Feng, hurry up and attack before he does. A tall and burly divine emperor urged. At the same time, the other divine emperors had already begun to mobilize the energy in their bodies. Unexpectedly, Divine Emperor Yu Ting and Divine Emperor 8 Directions didn't move at all when they heard this. The 2 of them were like 2 startled rabbits. What are you doing? Hurry up. The other celestial emperor urged impatiently as well. Divine Emperor Yu Ting remained indifferent. Instead, he slumped to the ground and shook his head violently. His expression was one of extreme despair. At this time, Vesni, who had already returned to the immortal realm, looked at Divine Emperor Yu Ting's true body sitting on the shrine in horror. Her mouth was wide open, and she did not understand what was going on. She couldn't remember how many years it had been since she last saw such an expression on Divine Emperor Yu Ting's face. Even hundreds of thousands of years ago, when his true body fought against another powerful being in the God realm, his expression didn't change. But now, Lord Yu Ting, who was at least one of the top 10 divine emperors and even had the potential to be the strongest divine emperor, had a terrified expression on his face. No, it wasn't just fear. There were other emotions hidden behind the fear. However, perhaps it was because Divine Emperor Yu Ting had not laughed for too many years, much less been angry, or perhaps it was because his divine power was too great. The hazy layer of light on the surface of his body blocked his face, preventing him from seeing it clearly. This seemed to be excitement. But wasn't this too strange? On one side, he was terrified, but on the other, he was excited. He even seemed to be looking forward to it. What had he seen in the game? What had happened? What kind of strange thing could cause the emotions of the projection to cross the barriers of countless planes, and even break through the tens of billions of levels of difference to make Lord Yu Ting's true body show such an expression? She couldn't help but feel nervous. Yu Ting's true body was like an ordinary person who suddenly lost a cell, and then rolled on the ground in pain because of the death of that cell. Although the strength of each divine emperor's projection in the transition space far surpassed that of ordinary martial emperors, compared to their true bodies, they were not even comparable to a single cell. Yu Ting's shrine was like this, and the eight-direction divine palace was not much better. The silent angel, who had just arrived at the eight-direction divine palace through the teleportation array, saw this scene. In the transition space, Qin Guang was still preparing to attack. Divine Emperor Yu Ting finally spoke again. Forget it, forget it. The eight-direction divine emperor's eyes finally regained clarity. They were also dejected, and even waved their hands desolately. Don't struggle. We're dead. The remaining 300 divine emperors immediately understood what these two meant. They had no intention of resisting at all. Instead, they planned to close their eyes and wait for death. Although everyone was at a disadvantage from the beginning to the end, and although they couldn't withstand the opponent's attack, they were just waiting for death. What was this? Wait, it seemed like, a thought suddenly came to the minds of the other 6 supreme emperors standing in the front row. This game mission seemed to be strange from the beginning. Before this, they had more or less experienced the test of the mission several times, but every time, it was their real bodies that were left in the divine realm, and their projections were sent here with a whoosh. But this time, during the teleportation, these divine emperors received a different order. It wasn't a direct order in their ears, but a thought was left in their minds. This thought told them to hold on no matter what until the pillar of light behind them faded completely. Although they didn't know what the divine realm's origin meant, they didn't dare to be careless. But now, it seemed that Yu Ting and Eight Direction didn't receive the thought of the divine realm's origin at all. Otherwise, they wouldn't have suddenly given up struggling so dispiritedly. It should be known that the death of their projections here would not affect their foundation. But the true body that remained in the divine realm had to survive under the influence of the Origin's will. Every move of the divine race was under the observation and control of the Origin's will. Although the divine realm's origin could not directly obliterate anyone, if it cut off the connection between their true body and the rules, or if it made it a little more difficult for them to comprehend the rules, then they would have to give up the idea of coming into contact with the real rules and becoming a Lord God. Although the divine realm's origin could easily live for hundreds of thousands of years, if they couldn't become a Lord God and become a part of the rules, they would die one day. Unlike the fragile life forms in the planes under their control, the death of the God race was a true annihilation, a complete disappearance. There was no chance of reincarnation or rebirth. Even if they took over someone else's body or relied on some cultivation method to achieve nirvana, they would still die completely after experiencing nirvana countless times. Compared to those inferior souls trapped in the cages they had created, the divine race was not even sure who was happier. But when they thought about it again, although those inferior souls seemed to have eternal life, in the final analysis, it was because their single lifespan was too short. Their false eternity was just an instant in the divine race's eyes. Everyone present was a divine emperor at the top of the pyramid of the endless divine realm. There were even divine emperors who had nothing better to do, who had just raised their hands to create a plane, only to completely collapse it with a flip of their hands. And this was not the first time. In the instant they turned their hands over, who knew how many civilizations had gone through the ups and downs of the planes they had created, and how many souls had gone through the cycle of reincarnation and rebirth. Therefore, the more powerful a divine emperor was, the more they understood that the origins will could not be defied. The reason why the divine emperors held such high positions of power and could summon the wind and rain in the divine realm was not just because of their personal strength or the influence they had. The most fundamental reason was that they were the closest to becoming a Lord God, the closest to becoming an eternal God. Perhaps one day, a divine emperor could become a Lord God in one fell swoop and become a part of the rules. Cutting off the channel of advancement was equivalent to letting them die. There was essentially no difference between waiting for their demise and dying on the spot. But now, Yuting and Ba Fong had clearly been abandoned by the origins well before the mission had even begun. Why? Could it be? The other divine emperors turned to look at Chen Guang in front of them. It was so strong that even a simple glance at it made him feel as if his will was rapidly collapsing uncontrollably. As expected. Chapter 1288. Previously, the gods thought that they could hide their plan to stall for time from Chen Guang. However, since both sides were facing each other and their strength was so strong, Chen Guang would be able to detect even the slightest change in the breathing rate of any god emperor, let alone the slightest movement. How could they hide it from him? If they had come in person, with the realm and willpower of a god emperor, Chen Guang would not be able to see through them no matter how powerful he was. However, since they were only projections, and because they were contaminated with the characteristics of humans, it would not be difficult for Chen Guang to see through their thoughts. Previously, Chen Guang was only concerned about the ancient well. Although the light beam was still sending away the low-level gods, it was only a minor detail. As long as the well was still there, the core and foundation of the realm in the cup would not be destroyed, and he would be able to leave safely with the human players. Chen Guang had slaughtered 999 deity emperors with a wave of his hand because both sides were enemies, and it was also something that Chen Guang had done in passing. Their delay was meaningless. However, now that the light beam had completely dissipated, this matter should have come to an end. However, when he saw the ancient well that was hidden by the gods reappear, he finally figured out why the gods were stalling for time. The coercion in the black smoke gave him a familiar yet strange feeling. It was familiar because he had felt a similar feeling from Colored Li's original body. It was strange because although the coercion seemed to be brewing and seemed weak, the momentum it contained was far stronger than Colored Li's. This meant that the power contained in the black smoke was far stronger than Colored Li's. However, Colored Li was already one of the strongest god emperors. It was much stronger than Colored Li, but its aura was similar to hers. Combined with the chaos peak that he had heard from the god emperors, the identity of the person represented by the 9 black smoke was obvious. It was Colored Li's father, the master god of chaos. Although Chen Guang had heard of this master god for a long time, he never thought that he would meet him face to face one day, and that he would come so suddenly and so quickly. Even if he really met the master god of chaos, Chen Guang felt that he should wait until he completed the test of the 3,000 worlds and became the real master of the heavenly Holy Grail. After that, he would become a god and kill his way into the endless heavenly realm as a king. Then, he would conquer billions of heavenly kingdoms with Colored Li and use the name of the master god of chaos to swindle people. In Chen Guang's eyes, the master god of chaos was Colored Li's father after all. However, after interacting with the many deity emperors, Chen Guang still had a deep feeling that these deities might not care much about kinship, even if they were just projections. It would be impossible for him to use the guise of a chaos master god to swindle others. However, Chen Guang originally thought that he wouldn't have to go against them. However, looking at the situation now, the master god of chaos did not come with good intentions. Chen Guang tried to blast the black smoke away with 2 moves. However, even though he had used all his strength, the force he exerted couldn't even get close to the ancient well. Instead, it hit an invisible wall that could not be seen by the naked eye. Then, it was like a clay ox entering the sea, unable to make any waves. It seemed that he could not stop the arrival of the master god of chaos. Chen Guang estimated the strength of the invisible wall in his mind. If he exerted all his strength and used a variant of the move just now, he might be able to break the invisible wall. However, who knew if there was another layer behind the invisible wall? If it was a blessing, it would not be a curse. If it was a curse, it could not be avoided. The arrival of the master god of chaos was definitely not to chat with him. It was very likely that he was ordered to kill the traitor like those master god of chaos. Speaking of which, Chen Guang also found it funny. He was a good young man of the new era who grew up under the red flag. At worst, he picked up a holy grail, or at worst, he became the owner of the cup. How did he become the traitor, in the words of these master god of chaos? I have never entered the heavenly realm, and I have never become one of your people. So, who did I betray? Who did I betray? These chaotic thoughts did not last long in Chen Guang's mind. The 9 ancient wells changed again. The black smoke coming out from the mouth of the wells became thicker and thicker. Gradually, it even covered the light completely. At a glance, there was only a black mass. Chen Guang measured the volume of the black smoke in his mind. As he expected, there were at least 3 more layers behind the first invisible wall. Even if he went all out and broke the first layer, he could only stare at the other layers. Forget it. Let's see what the master god of chaos is capable of. Chen Guang focused his eyes and stared at the black smoke. However, he was secretly circulating his internal energy. His internal energy did not stop growing. Instead, it continued to grow. In addition, after killing the last 300 Master God Emperors, especially the 8 Master God Emperors led by Yu Ting, most of their source energy was assimilated by the transitional space. However, there was always some core energy that was absorbed into Chen Guang's body. Not only that, after the transitional space assimilated the energy left by the many Master God Emperors, the special energy mixed with the 4 types of energy was further strengthened. The speed at which the energy was forcibly poured into Chen Guang's body became faster. Whether Chen Guang was willing or not, he was now in a situation where his breath was also becoming stronger. The black smoke cloud became darker and denser. Although it still looked like a fog, Chen Guang, who was hundreds of meters away from it, could already feel a suction force. It was written in the physics textbook that gravity was everywhere. Even if 2 ping-pong balls were placed on a table, there would still be a gravitational force between them. It was just that the gravitational force was so small that it could be completely ignored. But now, Chen Guang was hundreds of meters away from the black cloud. The volume of the cloud was only a few thousand cubic meters. If he could easily feel the suction force, it could only mean that the density of the cloud itself had reached a very terrifying level. It would not be an exaggeration to say that it was evolving into a black hole. What really affected Chen Guang was the pressure of the black cloud. At first, he could easily resist it. But as the power in the cloud became more and more solid, cold sweat gradually appeared on his forehead. He could not take it anymore, but there was nothing he could do. Chen Guang did not dare to float in the air anymore. Instead, he slowly landed on the ground. Previously, he had been using the azure real body that he had seen to measure the power of a god emperor. He had even imagined how powerful the master god of chaos was. But now, the master god of chaos did not show up at all. The overwhelming pressure seemed to freeze the time and space around him. Chen Guang finally realized that his previous imagination was so stupid and ridiculous. Even though the Master God of Chaos was only one level higher than the God Emperor, the difference between them was like heaven and earth. They were not on the same level at all. The difference between the Master God who incarnated the rule and the God Emperor who controlled the rule was simply the difference of dimensions. Master God of Chaos, what are you doing? Qin Guang, who was half buried in the ground, could not help but murmur to himself. At this moment, the black cloud suddenly dispersed and turned into a giant palm. It easily tore the invisible wall apart, and then crossed the void at lightning speed, grabbing Qin Guang hard. Qin Guang's eyes widened. There was no fear on his face, only helplessness. He thought that he could at least fight it. He did not expect that he would be defeated so quickly. He watched the black cloud turn into a giant palm. In his mind, he knew that he should avoid it. But when he really wanted to move, he found that he could not move at all. What was sealed was not only his body but also all the power in this transitional space. Of course, that included the new internal force in his body. He finally understood many things that he had not understood before. He was ambushed. Chapter 1289. From the beginning of the slaughtering world, the invincible Chu Feng had already fallen into a trap. This trap was not very profound. It was just an overt plot to trap him. Even if Chu Feng felt strange, he could not escape. In the slaughtering world, whether it was for himself or to protect Chu Zijin and Lu Fei, who were involved at that time, Qin Guang had to follow the requirements of the slaughtering world. In the end, Chu Feng transformed into a blood pigeon and went on a killing spree. Qin Guang had no choice. He could not control himself at all. After the slaughtering world died, the origin energy released by the divine emperors was absorbed by Chu Feng. Then, Chu Feng let out a colorful fart. He could not resist it at all. After entering the jumping-off building world, many divine race members had died here one after another. However, most of them were small fries and couldn't enter Qin Guang's eyes. They didn't leave much origin energy behind. After entering the true martial domain, Qin Guang began to slaughter the divine emperors with his own hands. This was because the 4 divine emperors of the 4 deities' temple were ignorant and took the initiative to provoke him. Later on, even after Qin Guang entered the 9th sacred city, he didn't take the initiative to attack the celestial race. When he started to search for the celestial race on a large scale, the celestial race had already hidden in the depths of the End of Thought Valley. Moreover, they had conveniently hidden the 9 ancient wells. After that, Qin Guang chased after the celestial race and faced 999 celestial emperors. Everyone's position was originally hostile. The other side seemed to want to take the ancient wells away. He and all the human players were trapped here. Of course, Qin Guang had no qualms about killing the Protoss. The Protoss would not close their eyes and wait to be killed. Naturally, a fight between the two sides was inevitable. As long as they fought, the result would be a fight to the death. Qin Guang did not care much about the lives of the Protoss. Once the Protoss died, their bodies and thoughts would naturally be reduced to origin energy. Then, they would be absorbed by Qin Guang invisibly. In addition, since he entered this transition space, he had been passively absorbing the mixed power in the air. These processes were irreversible and irresistible. Previously, Qin Guang felt that this was a good thing. After all, he would not truly die in the world in the cup. If he became stronger, it would be easier for him to deal with the God Emperor. However, the moment he was squeezed by the giant palm formed by the Master God of Chaos, Qin Guang clearly felt that he was very close to death. It was not the kind of death that could be resurrected, but the complete destruction of his soul. It was even more complete than death in reality. This was a trap through and through. Whether it was the absorption of the Divine Emperor's origin energy before or the absorption of this mixed energy after entering the transition space, there was only one fundamental purpose: to change the structure of his origin energy, to give his body divinity, to separate himself from the identity of the Master of the Holy Grail, and to take a step closer to the characteristics of the God race. Perhaps the mastermind's goal was to let Qin Guang indulge in the feeling of becoming stronger while lying down. Then, he would suddenly realize that it was a trap. While killing him, he would feel regret in his heart. Qin Guang did not indulge in it. In fact, he had always been awake and alert, but it was of no use. The Master God of Chaos had only sent a hand across space and time, and it was already so powerful that Qin Guang could not resist it at all. The pressure on his body was getting stronger and stronger. Qin Guang did not struggle anymore. It was not that he had given up easily. Instead, although he had been caught like a fool from the beginning to the end, as if he did not resist at all, in fact, he had exerted all his strength, but it was to no avail. As the pressure of the giant palm continued to increase, from time to time, there was a creaking sound coming from Qin Guang's body. It was an indescribable pain. When the pain exceeded the extreme, he felt nothing at all. Qin Guang knew that this was probably because he was really going to die. However, the greatest pain did not come from his body, but from the depths of his soul. Liuli once said that Qin Guang was insensitive and had no respect for her, a god emperor, and did not know fear at all. Qin Guang only thought that she was praising him for being brave and fearless. That was the truth. Although Qin Guang had always been an ordinary person, in his memory, he had never been afraid of anything since he was a child. To put it bluntly, he was bold, boundlessly bold. There were very few people like this, or maybe there were none at all. It was probably because of the ancestors' protection that he could live to the age of 20. If it were someone else, he would have died a long time ago. However, it was different this time. For the first time, he felt fear. It was a trembling that came from the depths of his soul, and it even made him feel despair. Vaguely, there was a crisp sound of glass shattering. Suddenly, the first crack appeared on the surface of Qin Guang's body, which was far more solid than diamonds. He was using all his internal strength to resist the pressure. The crystallization of his body was because it was too hard. However, in the face of the giant palm of the Master God of Chaos, he was still helpless. As the first crack appeared, more and more cracks appeared on his body, like the spring grass after the rain. In an instant, they covered his entire body. The cracking sound became more and more intense. Accompanied by a loud bang, the invincible and omnipotent Qin Guang in the true force domain finally broke into countless pieces, and then turned into smoke and dust that dissipated in the air. At the last moment before he lost consciousness, perhaps the giant black palm had completed its task, Qin Guang finally saw the 9 ancient wells through the giant palm. The 9 ancient wells also dissipated with the wind, along with his body. Not only did the Master God of Chaos crush him to death with one palm, but he also killed 2 birds with one stone when he condensed this giant palm. He used up the power of the heavenly Holy Grail contained in the 9 ancient wells. Suddenly, a thought appeared in Qin Guang's mind. It was related to the dissipating light beam and the many low-level gods that were sent away. It turned out that he was mistaken, or that all of the gods had been deceived. That light beam was not a passage back to the endless divine realm. It was clearly a sacrificial ceremony, and the purpose of sacrificing more than 3 million gods was to provide the Master God of Chaos with the power of this palm. The 9 ancient wells were not a path to the next layer of the floating island. From the beginning, they were the core of the sacrificial ceremony. When the 9 ancient wells were combined, it was basically a divine weapon of the endless divine realm, called the 9 Immortals' Peak. This 9 Immortals' Peak was the residence of the Master God of Chaos in the endless divine realm. Each of the 9 floating mountains surrounding the Chaos Peak contained the lifetime essence of more than 100 God Emperors. God Emperors had a long lifespan, but the Master God of Chaos had an even longer lifespan. Over the countless years of the divine realm, countless powerful deity emperors had become the followers of the Master God of Chaos. However, they did not manage to become a Master God and died on one of the 9 Immortals' Peaks on the path of searching for the laws. Most of their strength had been used up, but there would always be some remnants left on the 9 Immortals' Peak. Trillions of years had passed, and the 9 gods' peak had transformed from 9 ordinary floating islands into a famous divine artifact in the endless god realm. Legend had it that it had even withstood a blow from the god of space and time without shattering. Qin Guang could only express his speechlessness. Only God knew how the master god of chaos smuggled the 9 immortals' peak to the true martial realm in advance, and then disguised it as a task tool. Also, who was the one behind this? It's fine if I die because of you, but you still want to reveal the answer at the last moment? Are you planning to piss me off first? Are you still going to whip the corpse? Qin Guang could not be bothered to complain anymore. Forget it, if others are trapped here, then so be it. Now that I'm about to die, why should I care so much? This time, I've fallen too hard. Leaving such a thought in his mind, Qin Guang's vision turned black, and all his consciousness completely collapsed. Time passed, and no one knew how much time had passed. In the void of the true martial realm, faint murmurs could be heard. Maybe I'm dead? No, if I'm really dead, then why do I think I'm dead? Then shouldn't I know nothing, or should I be crossing the bridge of helplessness in the underworld? Or else, I should have a soul or something, right? Wait a minute, what happened just now? Forget it, I can't remember, I'll continue to sleep. Time flies. Qin Guang was clearly dead, but he always felt that he was still alive. He did not know how much time had passed, nor did he know what he was doing at this time, and what state he was in. While he was sleeping, another person fell into unprecedented busyness. At this moment, Lu Li had transformed into an ordinary martial artist and was lurking in the true martial realm. She walked and stopped in this world, and no one knew what she was doing. She looked like an ordinary martial artist. Perhaps 10 million years had passed, or perhaps 100 million years had passed. Lu Li's figure flashed in the 9th sacred city, and then she finally disappeared from the true martial realm. In the depths of the Sea of Time, on the Sage Island, Lu Li's figure was also left under the statue of Sage Right Qin. She was dressed in linen clothes, and looked travel-worn. However, she did not stay for long. She was like a passerby, and only lingered under the statue's feet for a while, and then disappeared. In the world of fate, in the world of Qilin's arm which was covered with brass fireworks. In the world of Mosaic Racetrack, many places that Qin Guang had been to, and some places that he had never been to, were still in the chaos. In the unformed small world, Lu Li's figure was left behind. After walking through all of them, Lu Li disappeared from the heavenly Holy Grail, and appeared in the real world. In the past, she could not appear in the real world. However, after the real world and the real world had merged, the real world had also become a part of the heavenly Holy Grail. As long as she was willing to consume her divine power, she could also descend. The outside was still bustling with traffic, and the lights were waning. It was as if nothing had changed. Lu Li stood in the campus of Gokyo University, and looked at a group of men and women who were talking and laughing in the distance. They were a group of elite students of Gokyo University. They were still the same people, but they were not the same people. At this moment, in this world, perhaps only Lu Li knew what had happened. Lu Li's figure suddenly disappeared after a long sigh. When she appeared again, she was already sitting cross-legged in the center of Cloud City. She slowly closed her eyes, and her body sank down little by little. She slowly and thoroughly integrated into Cloud City. Everything that should be done had been done. Next, it would depend on that guy's luck. Chapter 1290. Qin Guang didn't die. He was just completely shattered. His body and soul had completely fused with the Holy Grail. Of course, in the eyes of those who wanted him dead, he was really dead. He had turned from a complete soul into an artifact spirit. There was no difference between being alive and being dead. To the existences in the God realm who wanted him dead, the next step would be to wait for the 3,000 planes in the heavenly Holy Grail, especially the 9 great unique worlds, to evolve on their own, from nothing to something, from prosperity to decline, and finally to slowly walk towards destruction. The Protoss had a lifespan, so did the planes. However, to ordinary life forms, the lifespan of a plane was so long that it was almost eternal. But to the gods of the endless divine realm, especially the god-emperors and main gods at the very top of the pyramid, even the most complete plane, as long as it wasn't the endless divine realm, the birth and destruction of these worlds were nothing more than a passing matter. Now that the heavenly grail had evolved into a complete world and left the endless divine realm, it had become a world of its own. When the world of the Holy Grail was completely destroyed, this artifact would naturally appear in the endless divine realm. When that time came, it would be found, destroyed, and refined. The artifact spirit, Qinguang, would naturally be dead. As for how the 9 ancient wells that Qinguang was particularly concerned about were smuggled over, and how the master god of chaos forcefully broke the barrier and sent one of his hands into the heavenly grail, the endless divine realm had to pay a huge price for these things. The god-emperors and low-tier Protoss were only projections. Moreover, the Origin Will had exploited the loophole in the heavenly grail to force the projection to conform to the rules and obtain the identity of a player. It was easy and didn't need to pay a huge price. However, the master god of chaos had come in person. Even if it was just a hand, it wasn't something that the heavenly grail could withstand. But if the entire plane was directly torn apart, the most likely outcome was that this extremely troublesome cup would disappear again. No one knew how many billions of years it would have to wait for it to appear again. Or perhaps, the next time it would secretly cause trouble, it would be more prepared and become more difficult to deal with. Therefore, even though the origin will of the god realm was completely emotionless, it still took a risk this time. Then, he made use of the blood relationship between the master god of chaos and the emperor of the azure to trace the coordinates of the true force realm, which was a small world, across time and space. Then, he sacrificed more than 3 million genius Shenhuang projections from all levels of the endless divine realm. Finally, he managed to send a hand of the master god of chaos into the true force realm without destroying the stability of the realm of the Holy Grail. In the countless years of the god realm's existence, there had never been such a thing where the 8 master gods and their essence wills had joined forces. Yet, they were only dealing with a weakling, and they had expended a huge amount of energy to do so. This was not difficult to understand. It was like an ordinary person who had a complicated glass piggy bank in front of them. They wanted to take out all the coins in it, but they were unwilling to destroy the piggy bank. So, the energy they had to expend would be countless times more than if they just smashed the piggy bank. It was normal for them to be sweating profusely from exhaustion. This was just a simplified explanation. In reality, the origin will and the 8 master gods had paid a huge price for this. After the master god of chaos had crushed Qinguang with one palm, the origin will and the 8 master gods had taken the initiative to enter a deep sleep. They were only waiting for the heavenly grail's internal world to be destroyed and then reappear to find the cup. When that time came, it would not be easy to completely eliminate this tumor of the endless divine realm. Taking the initiative to enter a deep sleep to recover their strength was understandable. The origin will and the master gods were not worried that something out of their control would happen during this period of time. Of course, they did not have such things as emotions in the first place. In their minds, it was natural for them to decide on a matter and then complete it. The laws of the endless divine realm were formed by themselves, and the rules were set by themselves. Therefore, there was no possibility of failure. They only needed to wait for the matter to be completed naturally. It was like a person standing on a tall building and throwing an iron ball to the ground. Then, the iron ball would definitely fall to the ground sooner or later. Although the current heavenly grail was an anomaly in the endless divine realm and brought about some uncertainty, it would return to the divine realm sooner or later. When that time came, everything would naturally go back to square one. There would not be any anomaly in the endless divine realm in the future. Everything could continue to evolve step by step. Of course, the lifespan of the master gods was indescribably long. The origin will of the divine realm had existed since ancient times. It was just a nap. When it woke up, everything would be fine. Time flew like an arrow, but it was also as slow as a snail. But no one could stop time from moving forward little by little. Even the master god of space and time, who controlled the laws of space and time, could only achieve eternal stillness in his own domain. But the price to pay was huge. As for the entire endless divine realm, and then specifically to the heavenly grail, and even more specifically to the true martial realm in the heavenly grail and the real world after the fusion, to achieve complete stillness was beyond the ability of the master god of space and time. If it was possible, the master god of space and time would even want to personally speed up the flow of time in the heavenly grail. After all, the sooner the heavenly grail appeared, the sooner this matter would be resolved. In the campus of Wujing University, the sun shone brightly on the vast Yuanming Lake. A gentle breeze blew, and the clear and crystalline waves twinkled like stars. Specks of light were reflected on the glass walls of the library, adding some beauty to the library in the afternoon. The green willow tree swayed slowly with the gentle breeze, looking sleepy. A few summer cicadas were lying on the branches of the willow tree, chirping more cheerfully than anyone else, contrasting with the dispirited and listless students on the long bridge over Yuanming Lake. However, not everyone on the bridge was in a bad state of mind. There were still some people who were chatting happily and were in high spirits. The fourth-year undergraduate students were finally about to graduate. They had already taken their graduation photos in the student robes. As for the students who were about to graduate, they formed teams to go to the school building to get their own graduation certificate, degree certificate, or completion certificate. Right, I heard that Qin Guang is coming too. Do you think it's necessary for him to do this? A graduation certificate is important to us, but it doesn't mean much to a rich man like him, right? Otherwise, even if he sends someone else to collect it on his behalf, the school won't say anything, right? That's not necessarily true. The richer and more powerful a person is, the more they care about their reputation. Qin Guang might be rich now, but that doesn't mean that he's flawless. Right now, everyone's staring at the stains on his private life, and if he wants to wash his name clean, then he can't be criticized elsewhere. Obtaining his graduation certificate is a small matter, but if it falls into the eyes of someone with ulterior motives and posted it on the internet, then it will become a loophole for others to attack. That's true. Maybe some people have already thought of the headlines. Billionaire graduate? The dignity of a prestigious school only exists in name. Who is to blame? It's all his own fault. Where did he get the guts to do this? What era is this? He still wants to learn from the ancient times and have multiple wives and concubines? It's not just multiple wives and concubines. He's blatantly having 1, 2, 3, 17, 8, and 9 concubines. Not that many, but who asked him to have such a big heart? Who asked him to have 2 national goddesses that everyone is jealous of? That's right. I really don't know what's wrong with people nowadays. They have no sense of shame at all. Shoo, keep your voice down. If someone else hears you, they'll definitely take revenge and make things difficult for you. In fact, there's nothing strange about these rich people's affairs. It's just that Qin Guang is too young, and the women are too conspicuous. These things seem difficult for people to accept. That's right. Take the He family in Macau for example. Don't other people get along well with several wives? Haha. They laughed dryly and stopped discussing Qin Guang's private life. The reason was very simple. On the other side of the long bridge, Qin Guang was talking and laughing with his classmates all the way to this side. It was okay to gossip behind someone's back, but to discuss someone's private life in front of them was to offend them. Moreover, it was not a secret that Qin Guang had good ears. It was said that there was once a person who spoke ill of the little girl beside him, Sun Xiaoshuan, across a large square. He immediately chased after the person and slapped his face a couple of times. Even then, he couldn't say anything to vent his anger. The reason was very simple. Qin Guang was the first to stand on the side of reason, and others couldn't afford to offend him. In the past few months, many things had happened on the campus of Gokyo University, in the vast Huaxia, and even in the world. Qin Guang seemed to have suddenly changed. He was no longer wandering outside for more than half of the year like he did last semester. He had been staying in school since the beginning of the semester. He also didn't cause trouble at school. Instead, he went to and left school like an ordinary student. Of course, it was impossible for him to be completely like an ordinary person. From time to time, people from outside the school would drive into the school to look for him. For example, several executives of the Tianguang group would come to visit him. He didn't have any scruples. His office was where he was, and others could often see a strange scene in the school. A group of people in suits and leather shoes would either sit on chairs by Yuanming Lake, stand in a corner of the square, or sit in a bar in the school's commercial street. They were talking about the Tianguang group's assets, which were worth hundreds of millions, or even tens of billions. Until now, many of the IPs that Tianguang had laid out for a long time had been incubated. The global box office of Women had returned, World School of Performing Arts had been a global hit, and the variety show, High God, had been a hit since the 4th episode, sweeping the ratings and exporting it overseas. After the transformation of Tongshan Industrial Plant, Qingyuan Environmental Protection had almost swept the national environmental protection industry with its disruptive heavy equipment. It had also reached agreements with many top laboratories around the world. Qingyuan Environmental Protection provided technical support, and a number of scientific research institutions provided personnel, equipment, and other aspects of support. Several large photocatalyst research institutes were established, among which Qingyuan Environmental Protection was in a leading position. In less than half a year, Tianguang Group and Qingyuan Environmental Protection had transformed from two small, unknown groups into behemoths with a valuation of more than $10 billion. They could even leverage the global market of $100 billion. For the past 6 months, however, the true master of this colossus had been like any other student. He'd stayed on campus, not going anywhere. There had been rumors that a boss like him didn't need to do everything himself. There would naturally be professionals to take care of the business for him. He just needed to make more money. He didn't have such lofty ideals in life like other rich people. He seemed to enjoy the treatment of a boss who didn't have to do anything himself. Of course, it seemed that there was really no need for him to struggle. With the growing influence of the new photocatalyst around the world, many people originally thought that Tianguang Group was his foundation. However, in just a few months, Qingyuan Environmental Protection, which had derived all kinds of added value around the new photocatalyst, suddenly emerged. The world suddenly realized that even if this guy didn't do anything from now on, with the patents in his hands, he could at least monopolize the market of $100 billion in the next 20 years. Not to mention the inevitable competition in the high-tech industry, this didn't exist at all because he had a complete technological monopoly. No one could crack it. Men were so young and rich. It was inevitable that there would be some scandals. Qinguang's reputation in this area had never been good. He had never been a model of cleanliness. However, no one could stand the big thing he did last month. It wasn't that he had brazenly brought them to the front of the stage, but for some reason, 2 months ago, a large group of girls with different temperaments, but all of them were beautiful enough to captivate even the birds and beasts, suddenly appeared on campus at the same time. Although Qinguang used to meet different girls on campus from time to time, it had never happened before that all of them appeared at the same time. At that time, many people in the school saw the scene in the campus square. They thought it was a man's purgatory, the most terrible shuraba in the legends. However, none of these women made a fuss. Instead, they chatted happily. Qinguang himself seemed very calm. No matter how fierce the storm was, he would not move. At that time, among these women, there were Jiang Yage and Jin Shiyue, the two national goddesses who were popular all over the country, Sun Xiaoxuan, the campus belle, Wu Tong, who was dressed in a police uniform, and Tang Ying, who had an elite temperament. Zhua Jingxi, the helmsman of Qingyuan Environmental Protection, was also young and beautiful. It was rumored that she used to be Qinguang's counselor. Many people in the school knew her. Although Lu Fei, the proud daughter of the Dechuan Lu group, was not famous in the eyes of ordinary people, there were still a few people in the large Gokyo University who knew her. No one expected her to be involved with Chen Guang. However, the ones who attracted the most attention were the other three. One of them was the famous campus belle, Miss Wen, and the other two Lolitas, Enchanting and Wu Miaowan, who rarely appeared in public. These women appeared in the school at the same time. Coupled with the fact that they had appeared on the internet many times before, and Chen Guang had never denied the rumors, people could not help but wonder how big this guy's heart was. How shameless was he to be able to face the charaba in broad daylight without batting an eyelid? In this world, there were many people who were richer than him. There were also many people who had more women than him. However, there was no one who was as rich as him, had such high standards of women around him, and could risk the world's condemnation to get together in broad daylight. Even though the crowd did not gather for more than half an hour, and everyone quickly went their separate ways after that, the impact of the incident remained. Even today, 2 months later, it had not subsided. However, no matter what, after today, Chen Guang would officially graduate and leave Gokyo University. In the future, even if the students in the school wanted to mock him in secret or gossip about him, they would have to forcibly add the identity of an alumnus in their hearts. No one knew what Chen Guang's intention was at that time. Was he going to announce it to the world? However, there was no need for him to do so. After the incident, many people even indirectly asked around and found out that among the women who appeared at that time, not all of them had a substantial relationship with him. In fact, even Chen Guang himself did not know why this happened. Among the crowd, especially Jin Shiyue, Jiang Yage, Wu Tong, and Lu Fei, who had to face great pressure when they went home, they did not know why this happened either. Everything seemed very strange, very twisted, and very strange. At this moment, Chen Guang himself was still in the heavenly Holy Grail, unaware of the passage of time. The body he left in the outside world did not have a messy private life like others thought. Instead, it was as pure as a saint, and it had been a long time since he ate meat. Some people vaguely felt that the world was starting to become a little incomprehensible. The people they were familiar with seemed a little strange, but they could not find any loopholes. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.